Chapter 852. Hua Tengfei suddenly attacked. No one had expected this to happen. Even Ye Guqin was surprised. However, Ye Guqin reacted quickly and immediately took out his innate sword embryo to block the attack. Ye Guqin had recovered some of his strength and he did not mind exposing his sword embryo. Moreover, there were many sword cultivators who nurtured sword embryos. Ye Guqin's true identity could not be exposed because of a sword embryo. Hua Tengfei actually attacked. Many warriors were shocked and disgust flashed across their eyes. A battle between warriors was about fairness. However, after Shen Mubai was defeated, Hua Tengfei did not say anything and directly attacked. If Ye Guqin had not reacted quickly and took out his sword embryo to block the attack, Hua Tengfei would have succeeded. Dugu Wubai actually hid his strength. I think that sword embryo is also quite extraordinary. Many warriors whispered to each other. However, they did not realize that the sword embryo was Ye Guqin's gifted power. Unlike the astonishment of the crowd, only two figures stared at Ye Guqin in disbelief. Brother Dugu, could that sword light be? Han Xiaokui's eyes were round and her mouth was agape. She had never been so shocked before. As for Han Ziqiang, her delicate body seemed to be frozen in ice. Her face was stiff and her brain seemed to have turned to mush. She and Han Xiaokui were very familiar with the sword light that had escaped from Ye Guqin's body. It was the sword light that had killed all the blood demon bandits and saved the two sisters. At this moment, the sword light was actually taken out by Ye Guqin. The truth was self-evident. No, this is impossible, absolutely impossible. Han Ziqiang shook her head. Her face was extremely pale and bloodless because of the shock. Even when Ye Guqin had comprehended the imperial sword steel and defeated Shen Mubai, Han Ziqiang was only very surprised and unwilling to believe it. But now, all of the shock that Han Ziqiang had experienced before was nothing compared to the shock that she felt when Ye Guqin brought out his sword embryo. In Han Ziqiang's mind, she had long since assumed that the mysterious man was a chosen one who didn't want to reveal his identity. He could destroy everything with a casual flick of his sword embryo. In her heart, she even had the fantasy of a young girl. But now, when her fantasy had become reality, Han Ziqiang was unable to accept the truth. Han Ziqiang recalled the time when she cupped her hands towards the void and thanked the mysterious person. Recalling this scene, Han Ziqiang felt that she was like a clown who made fun of people. What was even more laughable was that Han Ziqiang had even mocked Ye Guqin for being afraid of the blood demon thief vomiting blood. Now that he thought about it, it must have been the price that Ye Guqin had to pay for activating the sword embryo when he was injured. No wonder Big Brother Dugu vomited blood at that time. It was because he was activating the sword embryo. Han Xiaokui also remembered. What? It was Dugu Wubai who saved you. Han Shan was also dumbfounded. When he thought about how he had ignored Ye Guqin, he looked a little embarrassed. I see. If that's the case, it's not surprising that he has such combat strength. Han Lingxian had also heard from Han Ziqiang that someone had saved them. She didn't expect that the person who had saved them was Ye Guqin. Second sister, now you understand everything. From the beginning, it was Big Brother Dugu who had been helping us. How could you treat him like that? Han Xiaokui said sternly. Han Ziqiang's throat was choked and she couldn't say a word. When she thought about what she had done, Han Ziqiang was so ashamed that she wanted to find a hole to hide in. On the other side, Ye Guqin turned around and the innate sword embryo floated around him. Ye Guqin had used his ancient god power to activate the innate sword embryo. He didn't expect it to be so effective. He looked at Hua Tengfei coldly. Hua Tengfei's sword light was aimed at Shen Tian's heart. As expected, Ye Guqin didn't react in time and didn't block the attack with his innate sword embryo. This attack was enough to kill him. Hua Tengfei frowned slightly. He didn't expect Ye Guqin to be able to block this attack. What is the meaning of this? Ye Guqin's tone was as cold as ice. Ah, nothing. Brother Shen is my friend. You didn't give me any face and hurt him like this. Don't you think I should stand up for him? Hua Tengfei's tone was cold and arrogant. His strength wasn't much among the Sword Dynasty's prodigies, but he had always been fearless because he was from the Hua family. He was already arrogant when facing the prodigies of the Sword Dynasty, let alone Ye Guqin. Do I need to give you face? Ye Guqin's tone was cold. He would never give face to his enemies. How would you know the status of the Hua family in the Sword Dynasty? How about this? Kneel in front of Brother Shen and apologize. See if he is willing to forgive you. Hua Tengfei said indifferently. Shen Mubai took a deep breath and stood up with difficulty. He no longer had the demeanor of a gentleman. Shen Mubai's eyes were filled with vengeance. He said coldly, if you want my forgiveness, kneel down and beg for mercy first. Shen Mubai's face was filled with joy. With Hua Tengfei behind him, Shen Mubai was confident. Not to mention, in his eyes, Ye Guqin had no background and was nothing to be afraid of. Ye Guqin didn't say a word and slowly walked towards Shen Mubai. Is Dugu Wubai really going to kneel down? Probably. After all, with Hua Tengfei here, the Hua family can't afford to offend him. Sigh, what a pity for a young hero. Some of the martial artists around sighed. Even the Cloud Emperor frowned slightly. However, Hua Tengfei had the Hua family's background, and the Cloud Dynasty couldn't afford to offend him. This is too much. Han Xiaokui's eyes were spitting fire. Han Lingshuan's face was also cold, but more than that, she was helpless. Sometimes, the situation was stronger than the person, and one had to admit defeat. Just when everyone thought that Ye Guqin was going to admit defeat, Ye Guqin's eyes flashed coldly. He kicked at Shen Mubai with his powerful physical strength. Puchi! Shen Mubai's body flew out like a kite with a broken string. He spat out more blood and pieces of his internal organs. Shen Lai was there, so Ye Guqin's kick didn't take Shen Mubai's life. However, it was obvious that Shen Mubai was almost crippled. He wouldn't be able to get out of bed without at least half a year of recuperation. You deserve to die. Shen Lai's eyes were about to pop out. All the surrounding martial artists were even more stunned. Ye Guqin actually dared to ignore Hua Tengfei. Do you want to die so badly? Hua Tengfei's aura rose. His eyes were cold, and his aura surged. You're the one who wants to die. Ye Guqin stomped on the ground, and it was like a thunderclap. His body shot out like a bolt of lightning. The golden ancient god power surged in his fist, and it burst out with endless golden light. It was as if he was holding the sun, and he punched at Hua Tengfei. You're courting death. Hua Tengfei held his sword and pointed it at Ye Guqin. Ye Guqin opened his 5 fingers and grabbed the blade of Hua Tengfei's sword with one hand. Break! Ye Guqin shouted coldly, and the ancient god power surged out. With a crisp crack, Hua Tengfei's sword was crushed into pieces. Ye Guqin clenched his fist again and punched at Hua Tengfei's chest. Boom! A dull, drum-like sound erupted, accompanied by a miserable scream. Hua Tengfei spat out blood and flew out. Chapter 853. The audience fell into dead silence. Everyone's face was a little stiff from shock, and the corners of their mouths were twitching. Just now, Ye Guqin had defeated Shen Mubai in 3 moves, which had already surprised them. But at this moment, the scene of Ye Guqin crushing the sword with one hand and blasting Hua Tengfei away, once again made everyone gasp. Hua Tengfei may not be considered a top heaven pride in the Sword Dynasty, or even in the Hua family, but in the Cloud Dynasty, he was already one of the top heaven prides, and even surpassed Shen Mubai and the other 2. And now, Hua Tengfei, who was high and mighty in the eyes of everyone, was like a dog, paralyzed on the ground, constantly crying out in pain. Ah, damn it, you lowly mortal. Hua Tengfei stood up with difficulty, clutching his chest, feeling that several of his sternum were broken. He relied on his status in the Hua family to abuse his power everywhere, but his strength was indeed not strong. Therefore, it was too easy for Ye Guqin to deal with Hua Tengfei. So you can't take a move from a mortal? Ye Guqin tilted his head slightly, his tone icy cold. Hua Tengfei was so angry that he couldn't help but spit out a small mouthful of blood. Good, good, you dare to treat me like this, I will make you pay the price. My cousin is an existence you absolutely can't afford to offend. Feeling the coldness condensing in Ye Guqin's eyes, Hua Tengfei didn't dare to casually attack again, for fear that Ye Guqin would directly kill him. But he was unwilling to admit defeat, so he said in a strong voice. Ye Guqin's face was indifferent, without the slightest change. Hua Tengfei said sternly, my cousin Hua Wuxiu is an existence of the divine dwelling stage, third on the sword ranking, and a disciple of the holy emblem of Tensei College. Can you afford to offend him? Hua Tengfei raised his chin, his eyes full of contempt. He thought that after he said this, Ye Guqin would turn pale with fright, and then kneel down and beg for mercy. Because in the past, when Hua Tengfei said this, all of his opponents had done the same. Dan Hua Tengfei was stunned. Because Ye Guqin was expressionless. His expression did not change in the slightest because of these words. Firstly, Ye Guqin did not know about Hua Wuxiu, nor did he know about the special meaning of Tensei College, the holy emblem disciple, and the sword ranking. Secondly, even if Ye Guqin knew about it, he would not have any misgivings. No matter how strong Hua Wuxiu was, he was no match for Gu Xiaoyang and Di Haotian. For Ye Guqin, who had been through a lot, this kind of opponent could make him guard against, but he could not make him fear. Although Ye Guqin's expression did not change, Han Lingxian and the others' expressions changed drastically. That holy light and darkness physique, Hua Wuxiu, is actually his cousin. Han Lingshuan's face paled. That kind of person was already a heavenly figure to her. It was simply unattainable. No matter how hard Han Lingxian tried, she did not think that she could catch up to such a heaven's pride. Looking at the sword dynasty, which was full of talents and countless heaven's pride of the sword, Hua Wuxiu was also an absolutely dazzling existence. In Han Lingshuan's eyes, Ye Guqin's performance was already amazing. However, when compared to Hua Wuxiu, he immediately paled in comparison. Faced with such a hidden danger, Han Lingxian was incomparably worried. Not only Han Lingxian, but some of the surrounding warriors who had heard of Hua Wuxiu's name also changed their expressions greatly. They looked at Hua Tengfei with astonishment. No wonder Hua Tengfei's strength was not outstanding, but he was so arrogant. It turned out that he had such a powerful cousin behind him. Oh, as expected of a frog at the bottom of a well. But after all, you're immortal. It's normal that you haven't heard of my cousin's name. You only need to know that no matter how strong you are, my cousin can instantly kill you. Hua Tengfei's tone was arrogant and unruly, as if he had found his backbone. Just one Hua Wuxiu is enough to make you so arrogant. Ye Guqin's tone was cold. Suddenly, he activated the innate sword embryo and turned into a shocking rainbow light, violently sweeping towards Hua Tengfei. Young Master Dugu, you can't. Han Lingxian cried out involuntarily. Defeating Hua Wuxiu was nothing. But if he killed him, he would make a mortal enemy of Hua Wuxiu. Puchi. Blood spurted out, and a severed arm flew out. The cut was incomparably smooth. Ah! A scream followed. Hua Tengfei clutched the wound on his right shoulder. His face was pale as he looked at Ye Guqin in disbelief. If you don't get lost, my next sword will take your life. Ye Guqin's tone was cold. Hua Tengfei's throat choked, and his body trembled like a sieve. Even though he had an arrogant personality, he cherished his life even more. Without another word, he fled with his tail between his legs. Looking at Hua Tengfei's figure flashing away, Ye Guqin frowned slightly. Of course, he was not soft-hearted or merciful. After all, Ye Guqin's hands were stained with blood. He would not be soft-hearted and let the tiger return to the mountain. However, if he killed Hua Tengfei directly, he would not even be able to leave the arena. Shun Lai would also find an excuse to capture him and then directly hand him over to the Hua family. Instead of doing that, Ye Guqin might as well drive Hua Tengfei away and then leave for the Sword Dynasty. Once he entered the Sword Dynasty, Ye Guqin would find a way to contact Kenpo. At that time, the problem of the Hua family would naturally be solved. Let's go back. Yi Guqian walked in front of Han Lingxian and the others, and said lightly. Oh. Han Lingxian was slightly stunned, and then nodded blankly. Han Lingxian really could not see through the young man in front of her. He was still so calm after provoking the Hua family. Han Xiaokui jumped 3 feet high, and was extremely proud of Yi Guqian's performance. Han Ziqiang, on the other hand, was full of shame. She lowered her head and did not dare to face Yi Guqian. Yi Guqian did not care. As the incident at the Tianyuan arena came to an end, the name Dugu Wubai swept across the area like a storm. He had crushed Shin Mubai in 3 moves, and even cut off Hua Tingfei's arm with 1 sword. Coupled with the deeds at the Imperial Sword Tablet, Yi Guqian's reputation in the Chuyun dynasty had surpassed the 3 heavenly prides. But there were also people who were not optimistic about Yi Guqian. Not to mention that Yi Guqian did not have qi cultivation, Hua Tingfei would definitely not let Yi Guqian go so easily. In the hall of the Han family, Han Shan, the 3 sisters, and Yi Guqian were there. Han Shan observed Yi Guqian, as if he wanted to see through him. Even he had misjudged Yi Guqian in the beginning. He did not realize that Yi Guqian was an unpolished gem. But no matter how Han Shan looked, Yi Guqian did not have qi cultivation. At most, he had a strong physical body. But that alone meant that he would not be able to go far. Coupled with the fact that Yi Guqian had provoked Hua Tingfei, Han Shan's expression changed slightly. In the end, he sighed and said, "My friend Dugu, I did misjudge you. But the Han family is too small to accommodate a big Buddha like you, so." Han Shan paused, and stopped talking. "Father, how can you do this?" Brother Dugu helped the Han family obtain the imperial sword skill. Han Xiaokui glared. Wasn't he burning the bridge after crossing the river? Chapter 854. When Yi Guqian heard this, his face was indifferent. In truth, even if Han Shan hadn't mentioned it, Yi Guqian would have left anyway. After all, the Chuyun dynasty was too small for Yi Guqian. He had his own plans, and he had to go to the Sword dynasty. So Yi Guqian only casually said, "Han family head, you're worrying too much. I've never thought of staying in the Han family forever. I'll say my goodbyes now." Big brother Dugu. Han Xiaokui was startled, her expression filled with reluctance. Where does young master Dugu want to go? Han Lingxian was also startled. Yi Guqian replied, "The Sword dynasty." What? You want to go to the Sword dynasty? Han Ziqiang lowered her head, remaining silent. Han Ziqiang lifted her head and looked at Yi Guqian when she heard him mention the Sword Empire. Her eyes were filled with surprise. Did he not know that the Hua family he had provoked was the Sword dynasty's peak Sword Dao family? As for Hua Tingfei's older cousin, Hua Wuxiu, he was an influential figure in the Sword dynasty. For Yi Guqian to go to the Sword dynasty, wasn't that just courting death? Little friend, please reconsider. The Hua family's foundation in the Sword dynasty isn't so simple. Although the Sword dynasty is large, if the Hua family wants to target you, it's simple, advised Han Shan. Oh, then is the Hua family and Hua Wuxiu really that terrifying? Yi Guqian raised an eyebrow. Han Lingxian was the one who understood the Sword dynasty the most. Let's not talk about how much power the Hua family has in the Sword Dao alliance. Just Hua Wuxiu is a character that we definitely have to look up to. He broke through to the divine dwelling stage at the age of 20, and he's a grade 7 prodigy. He has the sacred light and darkness body, and he has 2 types of swords. He's ranked 3rd on the sword ranking and is a disciple of the Holy Emblem of Tensei College. He's very strong. When Han Lingxian said this, her eyes were filled with a trace of reverence. She felt that she and Hua Wuxiu were from 2 different worlds. However, Han Lingxian did not know that the young man in front of her was an existence that could compete with Gu Xiaoyang and Di Haoyan. Although Hua Wuxiu was strong, he had not reached the level of the 10 young masters. Seeing Han Lingxuan's fascinated expression, Yi Guqian's expression was indifferent. Although he did not know the concept of the so-called sword ranking and holy emblem disciple, it presumably represented Hua Wuxiu's extraordinary status and talent. But unfortunately, it was not enough to make Yi Guqin feel any fear. When he found the sacred medicine to restore his cultivation and broke through to the spirit bridge stage in one fell swoop, he could even compete with the divine dwelling stage. I've made up my mind. I'll take my leave. Yi Guqin cupped his hands. If that's the case, then Ling Xian will go with you. I'm also going to the Sword Dynasty. Han Ling Xian bit her lips. Ling Xian, you. Han Shan's expression changed slightly. Yi Guqin had provoked the Hua family, and going to the Sword Dynasty was courting death. If Han Ling Xian went with Yi Guqin, she would inevitably be implicated. No need. Yi Guqin waved his hand. He did not want to implicate others. Young Master Dugu, Ling Xian knows how to repay kindness. Moreover, I've traveled to the Sword Dynasty several times and met some people. Perhaps I can help you in the Sword Dynasty. Han Ling Xian said. Han Shan was speechless. He knew his daughter's character best. Although she looked gentle and graceful, she was a woman of her word. If that's the case, then I'll trouble you. Yi Guqin said casually. He had the Sword Sun token given to him by Kenpo, and presumably it would be useful in the Sword Dynasty. But since Han Ling Xian was so sincere, Yi Guqin could not refuse. That's good. Let's set off tomorrow. The 5 Great Academy selection is not far away. Han Ling Xian pursed her lips into a smile. Then, Yi Guqin returned to his room. Han Xiaokui's face was full of reluctance, and she was sobbing. Her and Han Ziqiang's cultivation was not high enough, and they did not have the strength to join the 5 great academies, so they would not go with Han Ling Xian. Han Ziqiang did not dare to face Yi Guqin. Her head was lowered, and she was incomparably ashamed. Yi Guqin did not mind. From the beginning to the end, he did not put Han Ziqiang in his eyes. She was just a passerby. After a night, Yi Guqin adjusted his breathing, and then he boarded a flying boat with Han Ling Xian. Big brother Dugu, Xiaokui will also go to the Sword Dynasty in the future. Xiaokui believes that even in the Sword Dynasty, Big brother Dugu will become the most powerful sword cultivator. Han Xiaokui cupped her hands around her mouth and shouted loudly. Cultivate well. Yi Guqin stood at the bow of the boat and smiled faintly. Han Ling Xian shook her head slightly and laughed. Han Xiaokui completely idolized Yi Guqin. However, Han Ling Xian knew how difficult it was to make a name for oneself in the Sword Dynasty. Although Yi Guqin had made a name for himself in the Chuyun Dynasty and shocked everyone. However, in the Sword Dynasty, even a top genius like Han Ling Xian could only be considered mediocre. Yi Guqin's physical strength was not weak, but it was after all an unorthodox path. True qi and soul power were the true path of cultivation. Therefore, when Han Xiaokui said that Yi Guqin shocked everyone in the Sword Dynasty, Han Ling Xian only smiled. The difficulty was too great. After that, Yi Guqin and Han Ling Xian boarded the flying boat and left. Looking at the flying boat in the distance, Han Xiaokui clenched her fists and muttered, Big brother Dugu, I'll wait for you to make a name for yourself in the Sword Dynasty. Han Ziqiang shook her head and sighed. Xiaokui, you're underestimating the Sword Dynasty. As the leader of the 100 great dynasties and a country of sword cultivators, how difficult is it to make a name for oneself in that kind of place? I believe in Big brother Dugu. Han Xiaokui swore solemnly. Sigh. Han Ziqiang did not say anything else. Yi Guqin's performance had indeed shocked her. However, in a place like the Sword Dynasty, there was no lack of monstrous sword cultivators. If it was Yi Guqin, who defeated Gu Xiaoyang and Di Haoyan, maybe he could do it. Han Ziqiang suddenly thought. The boundless sky was filled with thin layers of clouds. Yi Guqin and Han Ling Xian boarded the flying boat and left the Izumo dynasty. Han Ling Xian intended to treat this as a training exercise, so she did not bring any servants from the Han family. Although the Izumo dynasty is close to the Sword dynasty, it'll still take more than 10 days to get there, Han Lingxian said. I have a question, Yi Guqin suddenly said. What is it? Han Lingxian asked. How do you become the Sword son of the Sword dynasty? Yi Guqin asked casually. This question. What are you talking about? Han Lingxian was about to answer when her expression froze. Become the Sword son of the Sword dynasty? She looked at Yi Guqin with a strange and puzzled expression. Did he not know what the Sword son meant? Young Master Dugu, do you know what a Sword son is? Of course I do. There are a total of 13 Sword sons in the Sword dynasty, and their status is equivalent to that of a prince. Yi Guqin nodded. Kenpo had told him all this. Since you know, young Master Dugu, are you joking? Han Lingxian laughed. What do you mean? Yi Guqin raised his eyebrows slightly. After becoming a Sword son, one could directly participate in the Battle of Prodigies. Therefore, Yi Guqin had already made up his mind to become a Sword son. However, judging from Han Lingxuan's tone, it was not that easy to become a Sword son. Chapter 855. The Sword son of the Sword dynasty is a lofty position. Even Hua Wuxiu and the others on the Sword ranking are inferior to the Sword son. That kind of existence is not something you can become just because you want to. Han Lingxian smiled faintly and shook her head. She thought that Yi Guqin's question was a little ridiculous. Is that so? Yi Guqin was a little puzzled. Because Kenpo said that with his talent and strength, it would not be too difficult to become the Sword dynasty's Sword son. It seems that the reality is not so. To become the Sword dynasty's Sword son, you have to pass 5 tests and kill 6 generals. Not to mention other things, if you can't enter the 5 great academies, then you don't even have the qualifications to compete for the title of Sword son. Han Lingxian explained. I'd like to hear more. Yi Guqin frowned and said. He did not know much about the Sword dynasty. The Sword dynasty does not have sects, only the Sword Dao Alliance. The aristocratic families also belong to the Sword Dao Alliance. The 5 great academies were established by the Sword Dao Alliance to nurture the Sword dynasty and all the geniuses who came because of the Sword Dao Alliance's reputation, providing a steady stream of new blood for the Sword Dao Alliance. And to become the Sword son, the first thing you need to do is find a way to enter the 5 great academies. I came to the Sword dynasty because of this goal. Han Lingxian said. I see. Yi Guqin frowned slightly. In fact, he was not very willing to join the 5 great academies. Because there were not many people who were qualified to teach him the way of the sword. But to become the Sword son, one must be a genius of the 5 great academies. In the 5 great academies, in addition to the guidance of famous teachers, more than half of the Sword dynasty's resources are gathered there. I heard from Xiao Kuei that you need sacred medicine to recover from your injuries, so you should have a good chance in the academies. Han Lingxian glanced at Yi Guqin and said. Yi Guqin nodded. Cultivation resources were indeed what he needed the most right now. Yi Guqin, you can join the academy. In addition to cultivation resources, some of the Sword dynasty's secret realms are only open to students of the academy. Yi Guqin heard Su Qingyu's voice in his mind. Is that so? Yi Guqin's eyes flashed. As a nation of sword cultivators, the Sword dynasty obviously had many precious treasures for sword cultivators. The Sword dynasty naturally wouldn't share these treasures with everyone for free. Perhaps only the disciples of the 5 great academies under the Sword Dao Alliance were qualified to enjoy it. Yi Guqin finally understood why the Sword dynasty attracted so many Sword Dao prodigies. Right, what's the point of the so-called sword ranking? Yi Guqin asked again. The Sword dynasty gathered countless Sword Dao prodigies in the South Horizon region. Naturally, there would be a ranking, and the Sword ranking is the ranking of the younger generation of Sword Dao prodigies in the Sword dynasty. There are a total of 100 names on the Sword ranking, which is also known as the prospective Sword son ranking. Because almost everyone who is on the Sword ranking has the possibility of competing for the position of Sword son. The top 20 prodigies on the sword ranking are no weaker than the sword sun. Han Lingxian said with a yearning look in her eyes. If one wanted to become famous in the sword dynasty, the fastest way was to be on the sword ranking. Being able to be on the sword ranking was also a supreme honor. When Yi Guqin heard this, he finally understood. Why was everyone so shocked when Hua Wuxiu said that his cousin was Hua Tengfei? In the vast sword dynasty, there were only 100 prodigies who could be on the sword ranking. And Hua Wuxiu, who was ranked third, was naturally an existence that everyone looked up to. Do you have the sword ranking list? Yi Guqin asked. This is not a secret. The last few dozen names on the sword ranking list are updated almost every day, but the top 30 or 40 names do not change much. Han Lingxian took out a jade slip and handed it to Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin took it and scanned it with his divine sense. 98th on the sword ranking, Shui Changfeng, a disciple of the Shui family, a level 8 heaven and earth spirit bridge prodigy. 84th on the sword ranking, Zhong Yan, a wandering prodigy who comprehended the metal sword Dao, a level 8 heaven and earth spirit bridge prodigy. The higher Yi Guqin scanned, the stronger the prodigies were. This is. When Yi Guqin's gaze landed on the 12th place on the sword ranking, his eyes suddenly froze. 12th place on the sword ranking, Mu Xingzu, a prodigy of the Tianxian College. She comprehended the peerless soul sword Dao, had extraordinary talents, and was at the peak of the level 9 heaven and earth spirit bridge. She could easily retreat from a divine palace expert. Mu Xingzu. Yi Guqin murmured. He didn't expect to see this girl here. Yi Guqin couldn't help but think of the stubborn girl who gritted her teeth and persevered under Qin Linner's sword when he first entered the sword sect pagoda forest. Now, she also relied on her own efforts to make a name for herself in the sword dynasty. She was no longer the girl who needed Yi Guqin's protection. Mu Xingzu is also a prodigy who recently rose to prominence. She was directly admitted to the Tianxian College, one of the 5 major colleges, but I heard that she never gets close to anyone of the opposite sex. Han Lingxian saw the strange look on Yi Guqin's face and looked deeply at him. Isn't Gongzi Duge not interested in women? Why do you have such a big reaction to Mu Xingzu? Facing the 3 sisters, Yi Guqin was able to remain indifferent. Therefore, in Han Lingxuan's eyes, Yi Guqin should be the kind of swordsman who prioritized the way of the sword. Maybe Mu Xingzu is too outstanding. No matter how hard Han Lingxian thought about it, she would never have thought of it. The young man in front of her was the master of Mu Xingzu, who was ranked 12th on the sword ranking. If Han Lingxian knew the truth, she would definitely be so shocked that she couldn't close her mouth. Later, Yi Guqin also saw Hua Wuxiu, who was ranked 3rd on the sword ranking. Divine Palace Cultivation, 7th grade prodigy, dual sword Dao, and all kinds of halos on his body. Gongzi Dugu, I hope you can keep a low profile in the sword dynasty. Hua Wuxiu might not care about people like us, but if Hua Tengfei pursues to the end, it will be very troublesome. Han Lingxian warned. Part of the reason why Yi Guqin and Hua Tengfei had a grudge against each other was because of her. Therefore, Han Lingxian didn't want to see Yi Guqin be killed by Hua Wuxiu and the others. But Han Lingxuan's words seemed to mean that they were very inferior in the eyes of Hua Wuxiu. It was like a lion that didn't care about ants at its feet. Yi Guqin smiled and didn't say anything. Han Lingxian only knew that his physical strength was amazing and that he could fight against a 5th-level Heaven-Earth Bridge prodigy. But she didn't know that when he recovered his cultivation, his strength would skyrocket again. Even Hua Wuxiu couldn't put on airs in front of him. When we arrive at the Sword Dynasty, I will be able to contact my acquaintances. Coincidentally, the selection of the 5 academies is about to begin. This time, I must enter the 5 academies, Han Lingxian vowed. She enjoyed a lot of fame in the Chuyun dynasty. However, in the Sword dynasty, even if she wasn't at the bottom of the Chuyun dynasty, she definitely wasn't outstanding. Han Lingxian glanced at Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin's comprehension of swordsmanship had surprised her, but unfortunately, he could not cultivate it. Han Lingxian sighed and said, Gongzi Dugu, don't mind it. It's already amazing that you can cultivate your physical body to this level. As for whether you can enter the 5 academies, like Lingxian, it depends on luck. Han Lingxian smiled bitterly. Depends on luck, huh? Yi Guqin smiled faintly. Chapter 856. The Sword Dynasty was the leader of the 100 great dynasties in the South Horizon region. In the Sword Dynasty, everyone practiced the sword. Although there were other warriors, there was no doubt that only sword cultivators could obtain the greatest cultivation and growth in the Sword Dynasty. On the other hand, only geniuses of the Sword Dao could be listed on the sword ranking, which was filled with endless halos. The Sword Alliance was a gathering of many sword cultivators in the South Horizon region. It was extremely prosperous. For various reasons, the Sword Dynasty became a sword cultivators' kingdom in the South Horizon region. It could be said that other than the overlord forces, the Sword Dynasty was a paradise for all sword cultivators in the South Horizon region. After more than 10 days, Yi Guqin and Han Lingxian finally entered the Sword Dynasty's territory. The Sword Dynasty was extremely vast, with a total of 360 ridges. The size of each territory was comparable to a prefecture in the Saint Origin Dynasty. The Saint Origin Dynasty only had 10 prefectures, but the Sword Dynasty had 360. In other words, the Sword Dynasty's area was comparable to 36 Saint Origin dynasties added together. One could imagine how vast the land was. Han Lingxian led Yi Guqin to the heavenly wind ridge of the 360 ridges. I'm good friends with the princess of the heavenly wind ridge, Qin Paisai. With her help, our chances of entering the 5 great academies will be higher. Han Lingxian said. Yi Guqin nodded and looked into the distance. A towering city sat on the ground. It was prosperous and bustling, far surpassing the Saint Origin Dynasty's imperial capital. The heavenly wind city is in front. Han Lingxian said. The heavenly wind city was the largest city in the heavenly wind ridge. It was also the residence of the Lord of the heavenly wind ridge. Each of the 360 ridges in the Sword Dynasty was governed by a lord. It was equivalent to the lord of the 10 prefectures in the Saint Origin Dynasty. The Qin Paisai that Han Lingxian mentioned was the daughter of the lord of the heavenly wind ridge. After a while, the airship landed outside the heavenly wind city. Flying was not allowed in the capital. Yi Guqin and Han Lingxian walked towards heavenly wind city. The city walls were dark green in color, looking as if they had gone through the vicissitudes of life. The wide city gate was at least 10 feet high, and there was an endless stream of people coming and going. After paying the entrance fee, Yi Guqin and Yi Ziqin entered the city. Yi Guqin glanced around and was surprised to find that almost everyone on the road carried a sword or had sword qi on them. Although there were other ancient martial art practitioners, most of them were swordsmen. So this is the Sword Dynasty. Yi Guqin's eyes lit up. He was a sword demon, born for the sword. In a place like the Sword Dynasty, he should be like a fish in water. Yi Guqin was also looking forward to the wonderful experiences he would have in the Sword Dynasty. Hey, have you guys heard? The Lord will be holding the Heavenly Wind Banquet in 5 days. Yeah, the Heavenly Wind Banquet is inviting talents from all over. It seems like he's preparing for the selection of the 5 great academies. Indeed, during the last recruitment, our Heavenly Wind Ridge was targeted by the Yellow Dragon Ridge, Purple Smoke Ridge, and other places, causing no one to enter the academy. If the same thing happens again, I'm afraid the Heavenly Wind Lord will be replaced. Shoo, don't say such things. On the streets, in some restaurants and tea houses, some ancient martial art practitioners were whispering to each other. The Heavenly Wind Banquet is about to start. Let's find a place to stay first, then I'll go find Pei Si. Han Lingxian said. Yi Guqin didn't mind. Soon after, the two of them found an inn and asked for 2 rooms. Young Master Dugu, I'll go find Pei Si. Be careful. Han Lingxian warned. Yi Guqin nodded. He knew that Han Lingxian was warning him to be careful of the Hua family. Although it was impossible for Hua Tengfei to suddenly come to Heavenly Wind Ridge, the Hua family had a lot of power in the Sword Dynasty. After Han Lingxian left, Yi Guqian casually strolled around the streets. The feeling of being surrounded by sword cultivators was quite good. Most of the items sold in the armament pavilion on the streets were swords. 3-year-old children were also waving bamboo swords around. What's that? Yi Guqian saw that at the end of the street, there was an incomparably majestic building that occupied a large area. On top of the building, there was a plaque with the words, Sword Ranking Temple, written on it. Sword Ranking Temple, is it related to the sword ranking? Yi Guqian thought to himself. He found a passerby and asked. Brother, this must be your first time in the sword dynasty. You don't even know about the sword ranking temple? The martial art practitioner chuckled. I'd like to hear more about it, Yi Guqian said. The Sword Ranking Temple is an institution set up by the Sword Dao Alliance. There are some sword moves left behind by the prodigies of the sword ranking that can be cultivated for free. Of course, if one is powerful enough, they can even break the sword moves. However, such people are too rare. The martial art practitioner shook his head and said. I see. Thank you. Yi Guqian nodded slightly and then directly entered the Sword Ranking Temple. The Sword Ranking Temple was extremely large and there was an endless stream of sword cultivators coming and going. TSK, as expected of an expert on the sword ranking. Even if he's ranked at the bottom, his sword moves are too powerful. Yeah, I'm not considered weak, but I was defeated by the 86th ranked Zhao Feng's shadow in one strike. There's no way I can break it. As soon as Yi Guqian entered the Sword Ranking Temple, he heard the whispers of the sword cultivators around him. Many sword cultivators would come to the Sword Ranking Temple to fight with the shadows left behind by the prodigies of the sword ranking to hone their swordsmanship. There were even more ambitious people who wanted to break the swordsmanship of the prodigies of the sword ranking and become famous. Of course, there were too few of them. Sir, are you also here to challenge the shadows of the prodigies of the sword ranking? A beautiful maid stepped forward. She glanced at Yi Guqian and found that he had no aura at all. He looked just like a mortal. A trace of contempt flashed in her eyes, but she did not show it. Her words were still appropriate. May I know how to challenge these shadows? Yi Guqian asked. So he's a mortal from another dynasty. The maid thought to herself. She said with a smile, if you want to challenge the shadows, you can directly enter the arena after concealing your identity. If you're lucky enough to break the sword move, it'll be less troublesome to conceal your identity. After all, those prodigies of the sword ranking are all arrogant people. Is that so? Yi Guqian's eyes flickered. But on second thought, it was human nature. If the sword move he left behind was broken by someone else, how could he not fight with the person who broke it? It was also because of this that the Sword Ranking Temple set up a rule that all those who wanted to challenge the shadows had to conceal their identity. Of course, if he was willing to expose himself, it did not matter. He just had to bear the consequences. Seeing Yi Guqian's indifferent expression, the maid felt even more disdain in her heart. Another ignorant person who thinks he can break the moves of the prodigies of the sword ranking, the maid had seen many people like this. They thought they were so powerful that they could sweep through all directions with their swords. But the prodigies of the sword Dao who could be on the sword ranking were not ordinary people. In the end, most of the challengers ended up being defeated miserably. When the real challenge comes, you'll know how big the gap is between you and the prodigies of the sword ranking. The maid shook her head slightly and thought to herself. Chapter 857. Yi Guqian could see the disdain in the maid's eyes, but he did not care. Just as he was about to face the sword roll prodigy's shadow. Suddenly, there was a commotion at the entrance of the temple. Isn't that the Su siblings? They're here. Hey, who's the person behind them? Why are the Su siblings treating him so respectfully? The Su family was a well-known family in the Tianfeng Ridge. Of course, they could not be compared to the families in the Sword Dao Alliance, let alone the Hua family. But in the Tianfeng Ridge, the Su family still had a certain status. Yi Guqian looked over and saw 3 figures walking in from the entrance. The two in front of him were a man and a woman who looked very similar. The man was slender and handsome, while the woman had a curvy figure and was as charming as a flower. It's Su Wenbin and Su Jingjing, but who's the person behind them? In the temple, many people looked at the young man and woman. Su Wenbin and Su Jingjing were the most outstanding prodigies of the Su family. Although they were nothing in the Sword Dynasty, they were still quite famous in the Tianfeng Ridge. They were both at level 6 of the spiritual bridge of heaven and earth. They were even stronger than Han Lingxian and the other top 3 prodigies of the Yun Dynasty. From this, one could see how fierce the competition was in the Sword Dynasty. A level 6 prodigy could only have some fame in a territory. Behind Su Wenbin and Su Jingjing, there was a hooded figure in a dark blue robe. Although his aura was not obvious, it gave people a feeling of profoundness. Most importantly, both Su Wenbin and Su Jingjing were extremely respectful toward that figure. Because of that, even more people became curious about that person. Young Master Yu, with your status, there's no need for you to come here to cultivate, Su Wenbin said in a low voice. It's just a warm-up. After all, the Tianfeng feast is in 5 days. The mysterious person called Young Master Yu said in a calm and arrogant tone. Even in front of the Su siblings, who were quite famous in the Tianfeng Ridge, he still had a condescending attitude. However, Su Wenbin and Su Jingjing were not dissatisfied at all. Su Jingjing's beautiful eyes were burning with passion as she said with a hint of admiration, as expected of Young Master Yu. I believe that Young Master Yu will be able to create a new record in the Sword List Shrine today. That's not necessarily true. Although it's just an illusion, it's still difficult to defeat those experts ranked at the top of the sword ranking, Young Master Jade said lightly. Greetings, Young Master Su, Young Lady Su, and this gentleman. The maid who served Yi Guqin immediately ran over to Su Wenbin and the others. Compared to Yi Guqin, it was clear that the Su siblings were more important people that she needed to entertain. Yes, make some arrangements for this young master. He wants to start a challenge as well, Su Wenbin said. Yes. The maid nodded and respectfully led Young Master Jade into the rear pavilion. Yi Guqin was left out in the cold. He didn't mind and entered the back pavilion. Soon, Yi Guqin put on a mask and a black cloak. What's his name? Before entering the arena to challenge, he had to leave his name. Of course, because they were hiding their identity, no one would report their real name. Sword Demon, Yi Guqin said lightly. Heh! What a domineering name. The person who registered the name chuckled. Then Yi Guqin stepped onto the arena. On the surface of the arena, bursts of brilliance suddenly rose, and the power of the array surged. Then, it condensed into an illusion in front of Yi Guqin. It was a young man. This man's illusion was Xue Changfeng, who was ranked 98th on the sword list. My sword move is called the Changfeng sword technique. Xue Changfeng's illusion finished speaking and directly charged with his sword. The sword momentum was like a storm. Yi Guqin held an ordinary long sword in his hand and collided with Xue Changfeng's illusion. The sword ranking Divine Palace tested one's sword skills more than one's cultivation level. Therefore, even if Yi Guqin had no vital energy now, he would not be overwhelmed. Those who can enter the sword list are indeed capable. Yi Guqin's eyes were slightly surprised when he felt the sword skill that was like a gale passing through. Of course, that was all. In Yi Guqin's eyes, this sword skill was still full of flaws. Boom! In just a dozen rounds, Yi Guqin broke Xue Changfeng's sword skill with a single strike. Someone succeeded in breaking the sword skill of a prodigy on the sword list. The commotion on Yi Guqin's side also attracted the attention of people from all directions. After all, most of the sword cultivators who came here could not break the sword skill. It's Xue Changfeng, who is ranked 98th. Although he's at the bottom, his Changfeng sword technique is not that easy to break. Some sword cultivators looked at Yi Guqin in surprise. He broke it so quickly. Could it be Young Master Yu? Su Wenbin and Su Jingjing looked at Yi Guqin in surprise. Due to the mask and wide cloak, outsiders could not tell who it was. It should be young Master Yu. Other than him, who else can break the sword skill of a prodigy on the sword list so easily? Su Jingjing was convinced. Little did they know that young Master Yu was currently in another arena, competing with a prodigy on the sword list. He was not weak and quickly broke the sword skill of a prodigy on the sword list. However, he was clearly slower than Yi Guqin. On the other side, Yi Guqin continued to challenge. Lei Chen, ranked 88th on the sword list, broke it within 20 moves. Mo Ling, ranked 81st on the sword list, broke it within 20 moves. Gong Yangming, ranked 75th on the sword list, broke it within 20 moves. Every time Yi Guqin broke the sword skill of a prodigy on the sword list, it would cause an uproar. If it was just once or twice, it might be admirable, but it would not be shocking. On the other hand, Yi Guqin did not stop at all. Those prodigies ranked lower on the sword list could not last more than 10 moves against Yi Guqin. Who is this sword demon challenger? He's too terrifying. That's right. Such a complicated and difficult sword technique was actually deciphered so easily. Could it be some old monster challenging him? Everyone in the sword list shrine was shocked as they watched Yi Guqin continue to challenge. At this moment, another figure appeared in front of Yi Guqin. This figure was thin and wore a bamboo hat. He did not hold a sword in his hand, but a flute. Heavens, it's Yen Choke, ranked 40th on the sword list. Can Sword Demon break it? Following the appearance of this figure, all the sword cultivators present stared at Yi Guqin without blinking. A prodigy who could enter the top 50 on the sword list was definitely a prodigy of the sword Dao. As for Yen Choke, he was an extremely famous itinerant elite in the Sword Dynasty. With his Misty Rain illusory sword, he had defeated many prodigies on the sword list. I've finally encountered an interesting person. Yi Guqin smiled faintly under his mask. Chapter 858. The 100 Sword Dao elites ranked on the sword roll. The elites ranked at the bottom would often change. However, once they were ranked above the top 50, they would not change easily. This was because the elites that could rank in the top 50 of the sword roll had absolute strength. They had trump cards that they were good at in various aspects, so it was impossible for them to lose easily. It was the same in the sword roll divine hall. Geniuses would appear from time to crack the sword arts of the elites ranked below the top 50. However, there were very few people who could crack the sword arts of the top 50. It has been a long time since anyone in the Sword Roll Divine Hall of Tianfeng Capital was able to crack the sword arts of the top 50 elites. Indeed, the strength of Tianfeng Ridge's younger generation can only be considered below average among the 360 ridges of the Sword Dynasty. The previous record was to crack the 59th rank. At that moment, almost everyone's eyes were focused on Yi Guqin. On the other side, young Master Jade's expression was ugly under the mask. Although he had cracked the sword moves of 3 phantoms up to now, they were the phantoms of elites ranked below the 80th rank. Furthermore, the speed at which he cracked them was far slower than Yi Guqin's. Where did this sword demon come from? Since when did Tianfeng Ridge have such a genius? Young Master Jade was perplexed. However, I would like to see if you can defeat Yen worried guest. Young Master Jade stared intently at Yi Guqin's back. The Su siblings were also staring at Yi Guqin's figure. Su Jingjing's beautiful eyes were unable to conceal the blazing love and adoration in them. I wonder if young Master Jade can deal with Yen worried guest. Su Jingjing asked in anticipation. It's hard to say. Although young Master Jade is strong, Yen worried guest is a top 50 elite after all. His Misty Rain illusory sword is not that easy to crack. Su Wenbin stared intently. It was not only the Su siblings. Almost all the other sword cultivators in the Divine Hall turned their attention to Yi Guqin. Even the female attendant from before wore a look of astonishment. However, she did not know that the sword demon that was the center of attention was the mortal she had looked down on. In the arena, Yi Guqin stood with his sword in hand. The figure of Yen Cho-ku suddenly flashed, as if it had turned into a puff of green smoke, and almost instantly appeared in front of Yiguchin. So fast. Although the surrounding sword cultivators were watching intently, they still could not see worried Smog's movements clearly. Yiguchin stomped on the ground. His body moved as if he had teleported to Yen worried guest's side. That sword demon's movement technique isn't weak either. Everyone was surprised. What Yiguchin displayed was naturally so close, yet worlds apart. However, because he didn't have true chi, he couldn't fully display it. The illusory figure of Yen Cho-ku swung the flute in his hand like a sword. Wisps of illusory sword chi gushed out like misty rain. Beneath Yiguchin's mask, his pupils shrank. If it were anyone else, they might find it difficult to defend themselves against worried Smoker's misty rain illusory sword. However, what sort of existence was Yiguchin? In terms of sword skills, he was probably not inferior to supremacies or even saints. This sword art is indeed rather interesting. Unfortunately, there are still flaws. It only has the shape of a misty rain, but it lacks the intent of a misty rain, thought Yiguchin. Yiguchin had spent nearly 50 rounds in this battle. Compared to his previous performance, it was rather slow. However, the entire sword-ranking divine hall was dead silent. All the sword cultivators felt as though their throats were choked. They were unable to utter a single word. He cracked worried Smog's misty rain illusory sword in just 50 rounds. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I would have never believed it. The entire divine hall seemed to be in an uproar. All the sword cultivators looked at the shattered illusory figure of Yen Cho-ku in the arena. Their jaws nearly dropped to the ground. As a sword Dao elite ranked in the top 50 of the sword ranking, Yen Cho-ku's signature sword art, the Misty Rain illusory sword, had been cracked just like that. This. Not to mention Skywind Ridge, even in places where elites gather, very few people can crack the sword art of an elite ranked in the top 50, right? Many warriors were left speechless. So impressive. Su Jingjing was dumbfounded. Yes, indeed. In order to hone his sword art, young Master Jie did not use any means like quintessential energy. Instead, he used his sword art to crack the Misty Rain illusory sword. He is indeed impressive. It is truly fortunate to be able to invite him this time, said Su Wenbin with a deep sigh. In order to win the favor of Princess Qin Paisai at the Tianfeng banquet 5 days later, Su Wenbin had expended a tremendous amount of effort in order to invite this great Buddha. And young Master Jade's performance did not disappoint Su Wenbin. Instead, it was a pleasant surprise, an extremely pleasant surprise. In the arena, Yiguchin pondered. The reason why he came to the sword-ranking divine hall to battle the illusory figures was to test the strength of the sword-ranking elites. Although he could not tell much from the illusory figures, the sword-ranking elites did not seem to be as strong as Yiguchin imagined. No, it was not that the sword-ranking elites were weak, but that Yiguchin was too strong. At the very least, in terms of sword Dao and sword techniques, Yiguchin had left the sword-ranking elites in the dust. Let's go straight to the main point. Yiguchin did not wish to delay any further. With a thought, the arena's array formation swirled. He could use his spiritual perception to control the array formation and choose the illusory figure he wanted to challenge. A figure shrouded in a mysterious black and white glow appeared. The figure was like water ripples, occasionally emitting a radiance that resembled the sun. At times, it would be hidden in darkness. It prevented others from seeing its true appearance. Although it was only an illusory figure, it exuded a corporeal pressure. Nearly all the sword cultivators in the temple turned silent at that moment. An unprecedented and terrifying sword aura pressure swept out in all directions. That illusory figure is. Some of the sword cultivators' eyes widened, and they could not speak clearly. Third on the sword ranking, Hua Wuxiu. With a loud bang, it was as if a huge rock had fallen into the ocean. Waves of uproar resounded in all directions. The sword demon had directly challenged the third on the sword ranking, Hua Wuxiu's illusory figure. All the sword cultivators were in an uproar. This young Master Yu is too daring, isn't he? Su Wenbin took a deep breath. Who was Hua Wuxiu? Even in the entire sword dynasty, he was an absolute top elite. It was rumored that the top 10 elites on the sword ranking were not weaker than the sword sun, and they were not much weaker than the elites of the overlord forces. As expected of young Master Yu. Other than young Master Yu, who else would have such courage? Su Jingjing's beautiful eyes lit up. Earlier, they were not sure if the sword demon was young Master Yu because they did not sense his true qi cultivation. But now, it seemed that other than young Master Yu, they could not think of anyone else who had the courage and qualifications to challenge Hua Wuxiu. However, the Su siblings did not know that in another arena, the real young Master Yu's expression changed drastically. He dares to challenge Hua Wuxiu. Who is this sword demon? If there is such a genius in Skywind Ridge, why would Su Wenbin need to invite me here? Just like the Su siblings, young Master Yu was also shocked. However, the gazes of everyone present, including him, were all gathered on Yi Guqin. If the sword demon could break Hua Wuxiu's illusory figure sword move today, it would definitely shock the entire Skywind Ridge. Chapter 859. In the arena, Yi Guqin faced Hua Wuxiu's illusory figure. He could feel that Hua Wuxiu was different from the other geniuses on the sword roll. That sword aura pressure was too strong. Moreover, Hua Wuxiu's figure could not be seen clearly. It was as if this formation was not qualified to simulate Hua Wuxiu's true appearance. Hua Wuxiu's illusory figure was wrapped in black and white divine light as he slowly raised his hands. Two swords appeared from his hands. One of the swords was as blazing as the sun, while the other was completely black as if it had blended into the night. It's Hua Wuxiu's quasi-tribulation divine weapon, the light and shadow swords. Some sword cultivators were excited when they saw this scene. It had been a long time since anyone had challenged Hua Wuxiu's illusory figure in the sword roll divine palace of Tianfeng City. Yi Guqin held his sword and calmed down. Light sword, daybreak. Hua Wuxiu's illusory figure flashed and appeared in front of Yi Guqin almost instantly. Yi Guqin used so close, yet so far and yet so far. However, Hua Wuxiu's illusory figure followed closely behind. The blazing light sword swept towards Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin held his sword and swung it horizontally, colliding with Hua Wuxiu's sword. An extremely strong rebounding force came from the sword, and Yi Guqin's figure suddenly retreated. Because the Sword Roll Divine Palace's arena focused on the cultivation and deciphering of sword techniques, these illusory figures' true strength was not considered strong. Even so, Yi Guqin was still pushed back. It could be seen that Hua Wuxiu was indeed a far cry from the previous geniuses. Shadow Sword, Curtain of Night. Hua Wuxiu's shadow turned his other hand, and a pitch-black sword qi gushed out, as if it had turned into a curtain of night, and enveloped Yi Guqin. Hua Wuxiu is able to use Komyo Kendo and dark swordsmanship to such perfection. He is indeed extraordinary, Yi Guqin thought to himself. Light and darkness were opposites. However, if one could completely comprehend it and even use it together, its power would increase exponentially. If he could combine the two and form the light and darkness sword Dao, it would be even more heaven-defying. However, judging from the performance of Hua Wuxiu's avatar, he wasn't far from completely integrating the light and darkness sword Dao. Even so, it was unrealistic for a mere shadow sword move to stump Yi Guqin. With Yi Guqin's monstrous talent in the way of the sword, Hua Wuxiu's sword moves were not unbreakable. Clang! Yi Guqin seized the opportunity and inserted his sword blade between Hua Wuxiu's light and shadow swords. What he wanted to do was to destroy the balance between light and darkness. In this way, the sword moves would be broken. Just as Yi Guqin was focused on breaking Hua Wuxiu's sword moves. The surrounding sword cultivators were all stunned, and their minds buzzed. They didn't expect Yi Guqin to be able to fight Hua Wuxiu's shadow on par with him. Since when did Tianfeng Ridge have such a monstrous talent? I'm really curious. Who exactly is this sword demon? Could he be one of the top elites on the sword roll? Maybe he's one of the elites from the 5 major academies. While everyone was guessing, Yiguchin had already fought hundreds of rounds with Hua Wuxiu's shadow. At a certain moment, Yiguchin suddenly seized an opportunity, and with a shake of his sword, he swung the sword in Hua Wuxiu's shadow's hand away. The light and darkness sword move was broken. Boom! There was a deafening sound, and the entire sword roll shrine seemed to tremble. Hua Wuxiu's shadow seemed to take a deep look at Yiguchin. Then, it shattered into specks of light. The air seemed to have frozen, and all the sword cultivators present seemed to have stopped breathing. Su Wenbin and Su Jingjing trembled, and they looked at the scene in front of them in disbelief. They knew that young Master Yu was very strong, but they didn't expect him to be so strong. Even Hua Wuxiu's sword moves were broken. If this news were to spread, the entire Tianfeng Ridge would be shocked. Oh my god, he really broke it. Is this sword demon also one of the top 10 elites on the sword roll? After a short moment of dead silence, there was a deafening uproar. How is this possible? On the other side of the arena, young Master Yu's body had already stiffened, as if he had been struck by lightning. Even if he was a genius on the sword roll, it was almost impossible for him to break Hua Wuxiu's sword moves, because the gap between them was too big. But now, he saw Hua Wuxiu's sword move being broken with his own eyes. While the audience was in an uproar, Yiguchin himself was calm. It's about time. Yiguchin didn't plan to continue fighting. Moreover, after challenging Hua Wuxiu, he discovered that there were no sword moves left behind by the first and second rankers on the sword roll in the shrine. There was no point in staying any longer. Yiguchin's figure flashed, and he left from the back pavilion. On the other side, young Master Yu's eyes flashed, and he followed closely behind. However, when young Master Yu reached the back pavilion, he didn't see Yiguchin's figure. He left so quickly. Who is he? Young Master Yu's face was solemn. He took off his mask and black robe. But at this moment, Su Wenbin and Su Jingjing entered the back pavilion. It's really young Master Yu. Seeing young Master Yu's figure, Su Wenbin and Su Jingjing's eyes lit up, and there was a strong sense of respect in their eyes. Young Master Yu, I didn't expect you to be so secretive. This way, young Master Yu will be unparalleled in the Heavenly Wind Grand Banquet, Su Wenbin said respectfully. Young Master Yu, Jingjing really admires you. Su Jingjing's beautiful eyes were also filled with passion. You've misunderstood. Young Master Yu's face turned slightly ugly under the hood. These two people actually mistook him for the sword demon. Young Master Yu naturally wouldn't admit it. The Su siblings were taken aback, but in an instant, a smile appeared on their faces. As expected of young Master Yu, so humble and low-key. The Su siblings sighed in their hearts. However, they knew that today's matter would spread throughout the entire Heavenly Wind City, and even the Heavenly Wind Ridge. Therefore, even if young Master Yu wanted to keep a low profile, he wouldn't be able to. As expected, in just half a day. The news of the sword-ranking Divine Temple swept through the entire Heavenly Wind City like a hurricane. Hey, did you hear? Someone managed to break Hua Wuxiu's sword move in the sword-ranking Divine Temple. I heard that it's someone called the Sword Demon. TSK, I wonder who he is. That's Hua Wuxiu we're talking about. Not to mention the Heavenly Wind Ridge, even in the entire 360 ridges, those who can break Hua Wuxiu's sword move can be counted on one hand, right? This sword demon has caused quite a stir. I'm really curious about his identity. Could it be that he's a genius from an overlord faction who came to our sword dynasty to train? Almost everyone in the Heavenly Wind City was talking about the sword demon. Outside the sword-ranking Divine Temple, a thin figure wearing a bamboo hat stood among the crowd. Not only did he break my Misty Rain illusory sword, he even broke Hua Wuxiu's sword move. Who is this sword demon? The figure smiled faintly, and his body dissipated like smoke. Am I hallucinating? A sword cultivator rubbed his eyes and muttered. Chapter 860. Just as Sword Demon's name shook Tianfeng City. In a large hall of the Grand Lord's mansion in Tianfeng City, Han Lingxian was chatting with a young lady. The young lady was dressed in a pale yellow dress. She had an exquisite figure, an oval face, slender eyebrows, and snow-white skin. She looked extraordinarily beautiful. She was the daughter of the Tianfeng Grand Lord, Princess Qin Paisai. Sister Lingxian, the Tianfeng feast will be held in 5 days. You must come, Qin Paisai said with a smile. Han Lingxian had met Qin Paisai by chance when she was traveling in the Sword Dynasty. The two of them became best friends. I have a friend who wants to participate. Han Lingxian hesitated before telling Qin Paisai about Yi Guqian. He has no cultivation. Qin Paisai's beautiful face froze when she heard the news. In this world, strength was the most important thing. In a top dynasty like the Sword Dynasty, strength was even more important. If one had strength, like those on the sword ranking, they would be respected and admired wherever they went. However, if one did not have strength, no one would care. Hence, when Qin Paisai heard that Yi Guqian had no cultivation, she did not show much curiosity or enthusiasm. Han Lingxian smiled bitterly and said, Paisai, although young Master Dugu has no cultivation at the moment, his understanding of the sword Dao is very strong. His physical strength alone is enough to defeat a stage 5 or stage 6 heaven's favorite. Physical strength is just a side path. Cultivation is the right path. However, for Sister Lingshuan's sake, I can let him participate in the Tianfeng feast and the 5 academies selection. As long as he does not drag us down, it will be fine, Qin Paisai said. Thank you, Han Lingxian said. At this moment, an old housekeeper rushed into the hall and cupped his hands at Qin Paisai. Miss, something big has happened. Why are you so anxious? Qin Paisai frowned. The sword-ranking Divine Palace sent news that a sword cultivator called Sword Demon has broken Hua Wuxiu's sword technique. The old housekeeper said. What? Qin Paisai's jade-like hands slapped the armrest of her chair, and she couldn't help but stand up. Her beautiful eyes widened, revealing an extremely shocked and incredulous expression. Who is this sword demon? He's actually able to break Hua Wuxiu's sword technique? Qin Paisai couldn't suppress the astonishment in her heart. Generally speaking, most of the people who went to the sword-ranking Divine Palace to hone their sword skills were from the younger generation. People from the older generation rarely went. Therefore, in Qin Paisai's eyes, this sword demon was most likely a young genius. Being able to break Hua Wuxiu's sword move meant that this sword demon had extraordinary talent and strength. Hua Wuxiu's sword technique has been countered. Han Lingxian was also astonished when she heard this. Did the sword-ranking Divine Palace leave behind that sword demon? Qin Paisai's breathing quickened. If he could recruit this sword demon. If that was the case, Tianfeng Ridge would have nothing to fear in the selection of the 5 academies. No, that sword demon disappeared without a trace. I don't know where he went. The old butler sighed. Damn it. Qin Paisai stomped her foot. Her pretty face was filled with regret. Paisai, why are you so anxious? Han Lingxian asked when she saw the strange expression on Qin Paisai's face. If no one from Tianfeng Ridge can enter the 5 academies in the selection of the 5 academies, my father may be removed from his position as Lord by the Sword Dao Alliance. How can I not be anxious? Qin Paisai bit her lip. The lords of the 360 ridges of the Sword Dynasty were all appointed by the Sword Dao Alliance. However, if there were no outstanding geniuses in a lord's territory for a long time and they couldn't enter the 5 academies, then that lord would be considered incompetent. He would be questioned and even removed from his position. Not only did Tianfeng Ridge not have many outstanding geniuses, but it was also targeted by the Purple Smoke Ridge and Yellow Dragon Ridge. Therefore, it hadn't had any results in the past few years. That Purple Smoke Territorial Lord and Yellow Dragon Territorial Lord are trying to remove my father from his position just because he's a loose cultivator and refuses to join their aristocratic family's faction. This time, we can't let them succeed. Qin Paisai clenched her teeth. Young Master Dugu and I will help you, Han Lingxian said. Qin Paisai shook her head and sighed. She didn't say anything. In her eyes, not to mention Yiguchen, who had no cultivation, even a fifth-stage prodigy like Han Lingxian wouldn't be of much help. That Su Wenbin said he would give me a surprise during the Tianfeng banquet. I wonder what it is. Qin Paisai thought to herself. After a day, the sword demon's name continued to spread like wildfire in the prairie. Yiguchen, who was at the center of the eye of the storm, had been staying in the inn. Although he had broken Hua Wuxiu's sword move, Yiguchen wasn't complacent. That sword move was definitely not Hua Wuxiu's trump card. Moreover, a mere shadow couldn't prove anything. I'm looking forward to fighting with those prodigies on the sword ranking. Yiguchen thought to himself. However, the most important thing right now was to recover his Qi Si and spiritual Si. Yiguchen estimated that if he could obtain the saint medicine to recover his Qi Si, he might be able to break through to the spirit bridge stage. After all, he had accumulated enough in the life and death chamber and had experienced many life and death battles. Now was the best time to break through. However, saint medicine was too hard to find. Moreover, Yiguchen was poor and couldn't buy saint medicine. At this moment, Han Lingxian just happened to return. With a faint smile on her face, she said, Young Master Dugu, come with me to the Tianfeng banquet in 5 days. Sure, but I'll have to trouble you to inquire about the saint medicine for me. Yiguchen cupped his hands. Of course. Han Lingxian nodded and said. Young Master Dugu, you should have heard of the sword demon's name, right? Yiguchen's eyes were filled with doubt. After returning from the sword-ranking temple, Yiguchen had been staying in the inn and hadn't taken a step out. Therefore, he didn't know that his casual action had caused such a stir in the entire Tianfeng city. Young Master Dugu, don't you know that the sword demon in the sword-ranking temple broke Hua Wuxiu's sword move? Han Lingxian said with a face full of admiration. So what if he broke Hua Wuxiu's sword move? Yiguchen's face was indifferent. He didn't think that breaking this sword move was a big deal. Han Lingxian heard this and was stunned. Breaking Hua Wuxiu's sword move, ranked 3rd on the sword ranking, wasn't a big deal. It was definitely a big deal. Young Master Dugu, you should know Hua Wuxiu's status in the sword dynasty. The fact that the sword demon could break his sword move is enough to make him famous in the sword dynasty. Han Lingxian said in a deep voice. She admired Yiguchen's talent in the sword Dao. However, this wasn't the reason why Yiguchen could ignore Hua Wuxiu and the sword demon. I don't think it's a big deal. Yiguchen said. In Yiguchen's opinion, this matter was not worth mentioning. Alright, then young Master Dugu, have a good rest and prepare for the Tianfeng feast in 5 days. Han Lingxian said and left the room. Han Lingxian felt a little uncomfortable with Yiguchen's arrogant attitude. She originally had a good impression of Yiguchen, but at this moment, she felt that Yiguchen was a little arrogant. Yiguchen didn't care about Han Lingxian's attitude. Tianfeng feast, I wonder if there's a chance to obtain the saint elixir. Yiguchen muttered to himself. If he could obtain the saint elixir and break through to the spirit bridge stage. Yiguchen was confident. Even in the sword dynasty, with a sword in hand, he could make everyone bow down. Chapter 861. 5 days passed in the blink of an eye. The commotion caused by the sword demon had yet to subside. Not only that, but the entire Skywind Ridge and even the surrounding areas had begun to spread the name of the sword demon. Many people were curious as to who the sword demon was to be able to easily break the sword techniques of the sword rankings prodigy, and even Hua Wuxiu's sword techniques. There were rumors that the sword demon was one of the top 10 prodigies on the sword ranking. There were also people who guessed that the sword demon was a prodigy from an overlord-level force who had come to the sword dynasty to gain experience. Of course, more people were curious as to whether the rumored sword demon would participate in the Skywind feast. Time's up, young Master Dugu. Let's go to the feast. Han Lingxian smiled faintly. Although Yi Guqin's seemingly arrogant attitude made Han Lingxian a little unhappy. But with Han Lingshuan's character, she obviously wouldn't neglect Yi Guqin because of this. At least, Yi Guqin had helped the Han family, Yi Guqin, and Han Lingxian, so Han Lingxian would do her best to help Yi Guqin. Okay. Yi Guqin nodded. But you still need to cover your face a little. If Hua Tengfei is present during the 5 academies selection, he will be able to recognize you at a glance. Han Lingxian was very considerate. Yi Guqin had just arrived at the Sword Dynasty, so no one knew him yet. It was obviously the best time to cover his face. Yi Guqin nodded slightly. He didn't cover his face because he was afraid of Hua Tengfei. It was because Yi Guqin was too famous in the South Horizon region, plus he had the immemorial demon sword. Even if he was a dead person in everyone's eyes, it would still cause a commotion if someone with a similar face appeared. Although the Sword Dynasty was far away from the Saint Origin Dynasty, people here shouldn't be able to recognize him. However, it was better to be safe than sorry. Therefore, Yi Guqin decided to completely conceal his true appearance and walk around as a Duga Wubai. The two of them left the inn. Yi Guqin bought an appearance-changing mask and put it on. This mask also had the effect of isolating one's divine soul from probing. Even after changing his appearance, Yi Guqin's face was still very delicate and pretty. It was less sharp and more reserved. After that, the two of them headed straight for the location of the Tianfeng banquet. The location of the Heavenly Wind banquet was located in the Qingfeng Garden in the south of Heavenly Wind City. In less than 15 minutes, Yi Guqin and Han Lingxian arrived at Qingfeng Garden. Qingfeng Garden covered a large area, with green pines and green cypresses, jade grasses and exotic flowers. The scenery was pleasant. There were already numerous young elites gathered at the entrance, and they entered in a single file. The Tianfeng Grand Banquet was a gathering of geniuses organized by the Tianfeng Ridge before the selection of the 5 academies. Therefore, the participants were all geniuses who were quite famous in the Tianfeng Ridge. Han Lingxian scanned the crowd with her beautiful eyes, and there was a hint of surprise in her eyes. She was at level 5 of the Heaven and Earth Spiritual Bridge and was considered one of the top 3 geniuses in the Yun dynasty. However, even the weakest person here was at least at level 3 or level 4. Level 5 was considered normal. There was no lack of level 6 geniuses. The Sword Dynasty is indeed impressive. Han Lingxian sighed in her heart. The Tianfeng Ridge was only one ridge, but the number of geniuses here was already greater than the Yun dynasty. It was hard to imagine how magnificent the scene would be when all the geniuses from all 360 ridges gathered at the same place during the selection of the 5 academies. While thinking, Han Lingxian and Yi Guqin walked to the entrance of Qingfeng Garden. Do you have an invitation? The guard at the entrance glanced suspiciously at Yi Guqin. The guard could sense that Han Lingxian was at level 5. However, Yi Guqin did not have any aura, as if he was an ordinary person. How could such a person be qualified to attend the Tianfeng feast? Yes. Han Lingxian took out 2 invitation cards. When the guard saw this, he said arrogantly, "Since you have an invitation card, then go in. However, if you are not strong enough, you will only be humiliating yourself if you attend the Tianfeng feast." You. Han Lingxian frowned, but Yi Guqin patted Han Lingshuan's shoulder. Go in. Yi Guqin did not mind at all. Han Lingshuan's beautiful face turned cold. She glanced at the guard and entered with Yi Guqin. Inside Qingfeng Garden, there were richly ornamented buildings and winding paths. There was also a crystal-clear lake that was as calm as a mirror, like a sapphire. At this moment, a banquet had already been set up by the lake, and delicacies were served on the table. The young men and women coming and going all had extraordinary auras. Obviously, the people gathered here were the elites of Tianfeng Ridge's younger generation. A prodigy at Han Lingshuan's level wasn't weak, but she definitely wasn't outstanding either. As for Yi Guqin, in the eyes of others, he was like a transparent person, without any aura at all. The female sword cultivator from the Zhuqiu family, Zhuqiu Qing, is here. A young girl in red entered Qingfeng Garden, attracting everyone's attention. The young girl's close-fitting clothes outlined the curves of her slender body. Although she did not have any sexy curves, she was well-proportioned and soft. Her long black hair was tied into a ponytail, and she did not have any makeup on her face. She looked valiant and formidable. Although she was a young girl, her aura was not inferior to that of a man. She carried a sword on her back, and her bright eyes made many people shrink back with fear in their eyes. Zhuqiu Qing's appearance was attractive. However, in Tianfeng Ridge, Zhuqiu Qing was also famous for being a battle maniac. That young girl is Zhuqiu Qing from the Zhuqiu family, a sixth-stage heaven and earth spiritual bridge prodigy. Her strength is extraordinary, Han Lingxian said with a solemn expression. Although Zhuqiu Qing was not on the sword roll, she was already one of the top prodigies in Tianfeng Ridge. Where's the sword demon? Where's the sword demon who broke Hua Wuxiu's sword move in the sword roll divine palace? Is that you? Zhuqiu Qing grabbed a young man's collar. No. No, Miss Zhuqiu, you've got the wrong person. The young man hurriedly waved his hand, afraid that Zhuqiu Qing would use him for practice. Is that you? Or is it you? Zhuqiu Qing pointed at 2 or 3 people. Those who were pointed at shook their heads like rattles. In Tianfeng Ridge, many prodigies had been trampled by Zhuqiu Qing. Other than prodigies of the same level, no one else dared to provoke her. Zhuqiu Qing kept grabbing people and asking them questions, but everyone shook their heads in denial. Suddenly, Yi Guqin felt a gust of fragrance. He looked up and saw Zhuqiu Qing standing in front of him. Are you the sword demon? Zhuqiu Qing asked casually. Han Lingshuan's expression changed slightly when she saw this. She was afraid that Zhuqiu Qing would cause trouble for Yi Guqin, so she hurriedly said, Miss Zhuqiu, you've misunderstood. This is my friend. How could he be the sword demon? That's right. He doesn't have any cultivation base. Zhuqiu Qing finally realized that Yi Guqin did not have any aura at all. Even a mortal is participating in the Tianfeng banquet. Zhuqiu Qing muttered and stopped paying attention to Yi Guqin. However, at this moment, a faint voice suddenly sounded. Stop looking. With the sword demon's monstrous talent, he's comparable to the top prodigies on the sword roll. How could he possibly be interested in our Tianfeng banquet? A young man in a blue robe with a sword at his waist said calmly. It's the boundless swordsman, Zhen Lang. He's here. A commotion broke out in all directions. Chapter 862. There were many famous people among the younger generation of Tianfeng Ridge. For example, Su Wenbin and Su Jingjing from the Su family and Zhuqiu Qing from the Zhuqiu family. There was also the blue-robed young man, Zhen Lang. He was not a member of an aristocratic family but a lone cultivator. By chance, he had obtained the inheritance of a supremacy who specialized in the water sword Dao and rose to prominence. Although he did not enter the sword ranking, he was considered one of the top prodigies in Tianfeng Ridge. Oh, you mean that the sword demon looks down on the prodigies of Tianfeng Ridge? Zhuqiu Qing's eyes were filled with battle intent. It was obvious that she wanted to meet the legendary sword demon. Of course. The sword demon is able to break Hua Wuxiu's sword technique. Even if he's not as strong as Hua Wuxiu, he's at least comparable to the top 10 on the sword ranking. Would such a person deign to attend the Tianfeng banquet? Zhen Lang sneered. Zhuqiu Qing rolled her eyes. That made sense. Tianfeng Ridge could only be considered below average among the 360 ridges in the Sword Dynasty. In the past Tianfeng banquet, not a single prodigy on the sword ranking had appeared. Since the sword demon could break Hua Wuxiu's sword technique, he should be a talented sword cultivator. It was normal that he did not want to attend the Tianfeng banquet. What a pity. I'd like to meet the sword demon and see who he is, Zhuqiu Qing said regretfully. With the arrival of Zhuqiu Qing and Zhen Lang, the atmosphere of the Tianfeng banquet became even livelier. At this moment, Han Lingxian suddenly felt a gaze crawling on her body like a caterpillar. Han Lingxian looked in the direction of the gaze and saw a sloppy and frivolous young man staring at her without any hesitation. Han Lingxian felt disgusted and approached Yi Guqin. "Oh, this beauty looks unfamiliar. Are you not from Tianfeng Ridge?" The young man walked closer to Han Lingxian, as if he didn't recognize anyone. "It's Su House from the Su family. Which prey is he eyeing now?" TSK, looks like another girl is going to be harmed by Su House. Who told him to be a member of the Su family? When the surrounding people saw the young man, their eyes were secretly filled with disdain. However, due to the background of Su House Su family, they couldn't say anything. The Su family and the Zhuqiu family were both great aristocratic families in the Tianfeng Ridge. Although they did not join the Sword Principal Alliance, they were not to be trifled with. "I don't know you." Han Lingxian gritted her teeth. She also knew that this young man was from the Su family and was not someone to be trifled with. Although she was angry, she did not release it. Su House's eye sockets were sunken, and his body was thin. It was as if his body had been hollowed out by wine and women. His cultivation was only at the 3rd level of the Heaven and Earth Spirit Bridge. If it wasn't for the Su clan's background, he would have been beaten to death long ago. "Hey, beauty, there's no need to treat me like an outsider. Even if we don't know each other, we can still get to know each other. I'm Su House from the Su clan. After the Tianfeng banquet, why don't I invite you for a gathering?" Su House smiled frivolously. "No need." Han Lingxian held Yi Guqin's arm. "Well, isn't he your servant?" Su House glanced at Yi Guqin and sneered. He did not feel a trace of aura from Yi Guqin's body, so he was most likely just an ordinary person. "Shut up, young Master Dugu is not someone you can slander." Han Lingshuan's expression changed. "What young Master Dugu? You're just a cripple. Get out of my way. How can a fresh flower be stuck in cow dung?" Su House raised his hand and grabbed at Yi Guqin. Although his cultivation was not good, it was more than enough to deal with an ordinary person. "Miss Han, sometimes, there's no need to endure anything," Yi Guqin said lightly. Before Han Lingxian could react, Yi Guqin dodged and grabbed Su House's arm. He pulled hard and then clenched his other hand into a fist. He gathered ancient god power and punched at Su House's chest. "Puchi!" Su House's eyes bulged and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Yi Guqin turned his body sideways to avoid the blood. He turned his fist into a palm and slapped Su House's face. "Pa!" Su House was knocked to the ground. His teeth flew out and his cheeks were bruised. Yi Guqin took advantage of the situation and stomped on Su House's chest. Crack, a series of bone-cracking sounds could be heard. Blood gushed out of Su House's mouth and he screamed like a pig being slaughtered. Finally, Yi Guqin kicked Su House into the rockery in the distance. With a loud bang, the rockery exploded. Su House was covered in dust and his head was bleeding. Dead silence, the originally noisy Qingfeng garden quieted down because of this unforeseen event. Zhuqiu Qing, Zhen Lang, and the others looked at Yi Guqin with surprise. That young man beat Su House half to death. From the looks of it, they should be from another place. This time, they're in trouble. Many Skywind Ridge elites whispered to each other, but there were also some who were surprised. That person didn't have a trace of cultivation. He defeated Su House with brute force. What a strong physical strength. No matter how weak Su House is, he's still a stage 3 prodigy. How could he be defeated so easily? Even I can make mistakes. Zhuqiu Qing glanced at Yi Guqin. Just now, she thought that Yi Guqin was just a mortal without any martial arts cultivation. Now, it seemed that although Yi Guqin didn't have a cultivation, his physical strength was extraordinary. It was comparable to a stage 3 or 4 prodigy. However, Zhuqiu Qing didn't care. She was just a little surprised. Damn it. Ah. You're dead. My big brother and big sister will be here soon. No matter who you are, you're dead. Su House collapsed on the ground and spat out blood. At the same time, he cursed. Han Lingxian clenched her teeth and said in a low voice, "I'm sorry, young Master Dugu. It's all because of me that you're in trouble." "It's fine. It's just a fly." Yi Guqin didn't care. Right at that moment, 3 figures entered Qingfeng Garden. The man and woman in the lead were Su Wenbin and Su Jingjing from the Su family. The hooded young master followed behind the 2 of them. His aura was extremely heavy. "The Su siblings are here. What a coincidence." Some of the surrounding elites looked as if they were waiting to watch a good show. "Ah! Big brother, big sister, save me." Su House wailed as he collapsed on the ground. "What happened?" Su Wenbin's face darkened. When they saw Su House, who was covered in blood and had a swollen face like a pig's head, their mouths twitched. "Who did this?" Su Wenbin's gaze turned cold. Although he hated the troublemaker Su House, he was still a member of the Su family. No matter what Su House had done, he should not be treated like this for the sake of Buddha. Many people's eyes fell on Yi Guqin. Su Jingjing glanced at Yi Guqin and found that there was no fluctuation of true qi on his body. Her eyes were filled with suspicion. "Did you do this?" "Big sister, that brat's physical strength is extraordinary. You have to help me." Su House roared with a face full of hatred. "If that's the case, kowtow and apologize. Our Su family isn't something a foreigner like you can mess with," Su Wenbin said indifferently. He was familiar with almost all of the younger generation in Tianfeng Ridge. When he saw Yi Guqin's unfamiliar appearance, he knew that he must be a foreigner. Han Lingxian gritted her teeth slightly. She could feel that the Su siblings' cultivation auras were even stronger than hers. Just as she was about to apologize, Yi Guqin said coldly, "Are all members of the Su family so stupid?" As soon as he said this, the expressions of all the elites in Qingfeng Garden changed. Chapter 863. The Su family was not one of the prominent families in the Sword Dao Alliance. However, they were an overlord in the Skywind Ridge and had a good reputation. In the Skywind Ridge, no one dared to provoke the Su family. Not to mention that the Su siblings were both at the 6th stage of the spiritual bridge of heaven and earth. If they entered the 5 academies in the future, the Su family's power would undoubtedly skyrocket. Under such circumstances, there was still someone who dared to provoke the Su family. Moreover, it was a mortal from outside the Skywind Ridge with no cultivation. It was no wonder that the surrounding geniuses were dumbfounded. In their eyes, Yi Guqin's behavior was no different from courting death. "Ha, how interesting. Jingjing, do you think the sun rose from the west today?" Su Wenbin was so angry that he laughed and shook his head. It was Su Wenbin's first time being targeted like this. The more ignorant a person is, the more arrogant he is. Su Jingjing's tone was harsh. Behind them, young Master Yu, who was hidden in the hood, looked at Han Lingxian and his eyes lit up. He had to admit that Han Lingxian was indeed a rare beauty. "Ha, but you have to pay the price for saying the wrong thing, don't you think?" Su Wenbin's robe fluttered even though there was no wind. He walked step by step toward Yi Guqin and emitted the aura of a 6th stage spiritual bridge of heaven and earth. Is this guy going to make a move? Zuoqiu Qing looked like she was watching a show. On the other side, Zhen Lang also glanced at him. This brat who only relied on his physical strength was going to be unlucky. Is everyone in the Su family so unreasonable? Han Lingxian was also angry. She took a step back, but the Su family took a step forward. Since you're from outside the Skywind Ridge, you should know who you shouldn't provoke the most. Su Wenbin's tone to Han Lingxian was not too harsh. He turned to look at Yi Guqin with a playful look. Obviously, he wanted to teach Yi Guqin a lesson. Yi Guqin stood calmly in the face of Su Wenbin's aura. He did not feel anything. If Su Wenbin dared to make a move, he would not mind teaching Su Wenbin an unforgettable lesson. However, at this moment, an Oriole-like voice rang out. "Young Master Su, that's enough. Sister Ling Xian is my friend. If you bully her, you're not giving me any face. A young girl in a light yellow dress walked over. She had an oval face, almond-shaped eyes, peach cheeks, and an exquisite figure. She had a beautiful and noble temperament. She was the princess of Tianfeng Ridge, Qin Paisai. Pei Si, seeing Qin Paisai's arrival, Su Wenbin's fierce aura immediately dissipated without a trace. On his handsome face, there was a hint of gentleness. The elites present did not find this strange. They all knew that Su Wenbin had always been pursuing Qin Paisai. If I had known that this lady was your friend, I wouldn't have acted like this. However, it's a fact that my cousin was injured. Su Wenbin smiled faintly. He was the one who started it. Han Lingxian frowned slightly. All right, Sister Ling Xian, young Master Su, for my sake, both of you should take a step back. Qin Paisai said. All right, for your sake, I'll spare this mortal. Su Wenbin glanced at Yi Guqin indifferently. Qin Paisai noticed the figure behind Su Wenbin and Su Jingjing, and a trace of surprise flashed in her eyes. Previously, Su Wenbin had promised her that he would find a helper for her to help Tianfeng Ridge achieve better results in the enrollment of the 5 colleges. It should be this person. I can't see through him. However, I can't offend him too much. Thinking of this, Qin Paisai could not help but say to Han Lingxian, Sister Ling Xian, let's forget about this matter. However, please ask your friend to restrain himself. After all, this is the Sword Dynasty, not the Chuyun Dynasty. Even if he has some ability, he won't be able to cause any trouble. What she meant was that although Yi Guqin's physical strength was outstanding and he had some ability. However, in front of a group of geniuses, he was still not presentable. Han Lingshuan's expression did not look too good. After all, Yi Guqin had taken action because of her. Got it. Han Lingxian nodded slightly. Yi Guqin looked on indifferently from the side and did not say anything. At that moment, a strong pressure suddenly appeared in the entire Qingfeng garden. A middle-aged man in a brocade robe stepped in the air. His face was upright and he looked dignified. It's Lord Tianfeng. Greetings, Lord Tianfeng. Seeing the man in the brocade robe, all the geniuses in Qingfeng Garden cupped their hands slightly. Is that the Heavenly Wind Grand Lord? Yi Guqin looked over. He could sense that Lord Tianfeng's cultivation was around the 5th heaven of the honorable realm. Previously, Yi Guqin had heard from Han Lingxian that in order to become the lord of a ridge, one had to be at least a honorable realm. In that case, not to mention the honorables of the Sword Principal Alliance. In total, there were at least 360 supremacies in the 360 ridges. This was an extremely shocking number. No wonder the Sword Dynasty could become the #1 dynasty in the South Horizon region. Yi Guqin sighed inwardly. Lord Tianfeng's name was Qin Zhen. He looked around and said with a smile, you are all the young geniuses of my Tianfeng Ridge. In a few days, you will participate in the recruitment of the 5 academies. I hope that you will do your best and bring glory to my Tianfeng Ridge. We will not disappoint Lord Tianfeng. Many geniuses cupped their hands together. Then, the Tianfeng feast officially begins. Qin Zhen waved his hand. All kinds of delicacies, medicinal dishes, and spiritual herbs were served on the table. The Tianfeng feast was a mobilization meeting before the recruitment of the 5 academies. Qin Zhen even came personally to explain the details of the recruitment of the 5 academies to the geniuses present. All the geniuses listened attentively. Yi Guqin was the only one who kept stuffing food into his mouth. It wasn't that Yi Guqin was greedy, but that these medicinal dishes all had healing effects. Yi Guqin lacked this the most now. All the medicinal dishes that entered Yi Guqin's body were directly devoured by the demonic qi and turned into the purest energy to nourish his body. However, in the eyes of others, this scene seemed a little low-level. As expected, he's from a foreign land and has never seen the world. Su Jingjing couldn't help but sneer. Even Qin Zhen frowned slightly. Among the geniuses present, perhaps only Yi Guqin was not listening to him. However, after discovering that Yi Guqin had no cultivation, Qin Zhen no longer paid attention to him. But in fact, Yi Guqin was absolutely confident that he could enter the 5 academies, so he didn't care too much about these details. Everyone, for those who have performed outstandingly in the recruitment of the 5 academies, I will reward them with a sacred medicine, a spirit bodhi. I hope that everyone will work hard, Qin Zhen said. As soon as these words came out, the eyes of many of the geniuses present surged with passion. A rare item like a sacred medicine was not something that could be obtained casually. Qin Zhen's actions undoubtedly gave all the geniuses a shot of adrenaline, making them even more excited. Oh, Spirit Bodhi! Yi Guqin's eyes lit up. This sacred medicine was suitable for recovering his qi. On the other side, the corners of young Master Yu's mouth curled up into a faint smile. This Spirit Bodhi belongs to me. Chapter 864. The atmosphere in Qingfeng Garden was lively. After Qin Zhen finished explaining the selection of the 5 academies, many of the elites present began to eat heartily. As they toasted, many youths also expressed their goodwill to Han Lingxian. After all, Han Lingxian was not weak, and she was beautiful and had a good figure. Moreover, she was friends with the princess, so she naturally attracted some people's attention. However, Han Lingxian did not care about these people and stayed by Yi Guqin's side. Some people could not help but look at Yi Guqin with a trace of contempt and jealousy. Qin Paisai walked over with a wine cup and clinked glasses with Han Lingxian. Then, she looked at Yi Guqin's handsome face and teased, "Sister Lingxian, he said he's your friend, but he's not your toy boy, is he? What nonsense are you talking about? Young Master Dugu is not that kind of person." Han Lingxian hurriedly waved her hand, her face slightly red. She could not help but think of the time at the Imperial Sword Tablet. Even the phantom of her Han family ancestor had knelt to Yi Guqin. Even if such a person was quiet now, who could say for sure what would happen in the future? "Hey, looks like Zuoqiu Qing is itching for a fight," Qin Paisai suddenly said. There was also an arena by the side of the crystal-clear sapphire lake. After all, the Tianfeng feast was not just a gathering for dining. Some of the young elites would also spar with each other. Zuoqiu Qing leaped onto the arena. She was dressed in red and looked valiant. She unsheathed the long sword on her back and held it in her hand. "Zhen Lang, we haven't fought in a long time. Let's spar." Zuoqiu Qing's eyes were filled with battle intent. Sigh. Zhen Lang shook his head slightly and flashed onto the arena. He also took out a long blue sword that looked like an ice crystal. The 2 famous geniuses of Tianfeng Ridge immediately engaged in a fierce battle. The intense battle and the skillful swordsmanship couldn't help but cause the surrounding elites to burst into cheers. Even Qin Paisai and Han Lingxian could not take their eyes off them. Yi Guqin was uninterested. He picked up a cup of medicinal wine brewed from a quasi-divine medicine and drank it alone. Seeing this, Qin Paisai couldn't help but feel that Han Lingxuan's friend was a little interesting. He was clearly a mortal without any cultivation, but he always gave people a sense of mystery. "Young Master Dugu, right? What do you think of their sword techniques?" Qin Paisai asked. Yi Guqin lifted his eyelids and said calmly, "It's passable." Actually, in Yi Guqin's eyes, this was still a good thing. Both of their swordsmanship had many flaws. In comparison, although the geniuses on the sword ranking also had flaws, they were obviously much better than these 2. However, Qin Paisai could not help but laugh when she heard this. She said to Han Lingxian, "Sister Lingxian, your friend is really arrogant but incompetent." The outstanding geniuses of Tianfeng Ridge seemed to be nothing in his eyes. Young Master Dugu's comprehension of swordsmanship is amazing. It's just that he doesn't have genuine qi cultivation. Han Lingxian explained. "Is that so?" Qin Paisai smiled and did not say anything else. In the end, Zuoqiu Qing and Zhen Lang ended in a draw. In fact, they did not completely reveal their trump cards. They were going to use their full strength during the 5 academies selection. Next, it was Su Wenbin's turn to enter the arena. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been practicing a royal level sword art recently, and I've gained some understanding of it. So, I'd like to ask for your guidance. Su Wenbin lifted his chin slightly. His words were humble, but his face could not hide his pride. He looked at Qin Paisai from time to time. Obviously, he wanted to show off his strength in front of the person he admired. Then, Su Wenbin took out his sword and began to attack. He was using a lower royal level swordsmanship, the startling rainbow swordsmanship. The sword momentum was as dazzling as the 9 heavens. The sword radiance was as dazzling as a rainbow. What a gorgeous swordsmanship! Qin Paisai was slightly fascinated by the scene. Su Wenbin was originally a handsome man. When he wielded his sword, he was extremely free and easy. Coupled with the dazzling sword radiance, he was unparalleled. Young Master Su is so handsome, he's worthy of being the top genius of Tianfeng Ridge. Many girls present were fascinated by the scene. Su Jingjing puffed out her chest and said proudly, "Big brother's swordsmanship is extraordinary." Even Han Lingxian, who disliked the Su family, had a faint look of amazement in her eyes. Su Wenbin's swordsmanship was indeed eye-catching. Qin Paisai suddenly looked at Yi Guqin with a playful smile on her face. She asked, "Young Master Dugu, you said that Zuqiu Qing and the others' swordsmanship was barely passable. May I ask how young Master Su's swordsmanship is?" Qin Paisai was actually teasing Yi Guqin with her question. Didn't you look down on Zuqiu Qing and the others' swordsmanship? However, Su Wenbin's swordsmanship was now praised by all the geniuses present. Are you going to go against your conscience and say that it's barely passable? Yi Guqin sipped his medicinal wine with a calm expression. He did not answer directly. Young Master Dugu, are you speechless? Qin Paisai asked with a smile. Do you really want me to say it? Yi Guqin raised his eyebrows slightly. Just say it, Qin Paisai said. It's unsightly. Yi Guqin said coldly and continued to drink his wine. The smile on Qin Paisai's face froze. Some of the surrounding geniuses were also stunned. Yi Guqin did not conceal his voice, so his words were directly heard by everyone around him. Unsightly. Some of the geniuses thought they were hallucinating. Su Wenbin's dreamlike swordsmanship made everyone gasp in amazement and immerse themselves in it. However, Yi Guqin actually said that it was unsightly. You're just a country bumpkin. What nonsense are you talking about? Su Jingjing gritted her teeth in anger and shouted. He's just a frog at the bottom of a well. Su House, who was severely injured, did not leave. After taking a healing elixir, he was still there, but his face was bruised and swollen. At this moment, he was also scolding Yi Guqin. I thought that this person was a little interesting, but now it seems that his taste is limited. Zuqiu Qing shook her head slightly. Even she felt that there was nothing wrong with Su Wenbin's swordsmanship. Yi Guqin was just a mere mortal. What right did he have to comment? Qin Zhen, who was sitting in the main seat, looked indifferent. He looked away after glancing at Yi Guqin. This kind of claptrap was not unheard of in the past Tianfeng grand banquets. Ha! How interesting. A cripple dares to boast so shamelessly. Su Wenbin was so angry that he laughed and stared coldly at Yi Guqin. He had displayed his strength in order to gain Qin Paisai's favor and gain the attention of the Tianfeng Grand Lord. But now, his plan had been ruined by an ant. The sword is the king of all weapons. It's a killing weapon, but in your hands, it has become a toy to show off and show off. You. Are you really a sword cultivator? Yi Guqin questioned coldly. Su Wenbin's face flushed red and his throat choked up. Yi Guqin's evaluation was based on the facts, not the person. Putting aside the friction between him and Su Wenbin. Su Wenbin's flashy swordsmanship alone made Yi Guqin impatient. He was simply using the sword as a tool to show off. For Yi Guqin, who viewed the sword as his life, this was enough to make him feel disgusted. Humph. Since you said that my swordsmanship is flashy, then what about yours? Su Wenbin's face was red from being questioned by Yi Guqin. He could not help but shout. "One strike is enough to break your swordsmanship," Yi Guqin said coldly and stood up with his hands behind his back. All the prodigies in Qingfeng Garden felt their hearts skip a beat. Chapter 865. One strike is enough to break Su Wenbin's sword technique. How confident must he be to be able to say something like that? Zhuo Qiuqing, Zhen Lang, and the others were stunned. Although they were as famous as Su Wenbin, it was almost impossible for them to break Su Wenbin's sword technique with one strike, let alone an emperor-level sword technique. Nonsense. Do you think you're a prodigy on the sword roll? Su Jingjing could not help but glare at Yi Guqin. She had seen arrogant people before, but she had never seen someone so arrogant. If he was strong, it would be acceptable for him to be arrogant. However, such words came from a young man without any true energy cultivation base. It was so arrogant that it was annoying. He's just trying to please the crowd. Zhen Lang shook his head. Even he was not confident that he could break Su Wenbin's startling rainbow sword technique, let alone break it with one strike. It was a joke. Young Master Dugu, don't be rash. Han Lingxian tugged at Yi Guqin's sleeve. She knew that Yi Guqin was talented in the way of the sword. However, this was the Sword Dynasty, not the Izumo Dynasty. His opponent was not a half-baked prodigy like Shinmubai, but a true prodigy in the way of the sword. If I can't even break such a fancy sword technique, then I'm not worthy of being a sword cultivator. Yi Guqin shook his head with an indifferent expression. Sister Lingxian, your friend is really arrogant. Qin Paisai's pretty face was also filled with surprise. She could not figure out what gave Yi Guqin the right to say something like that. Ha, what a joke. This is the funniest joke I've ever heard. You can break my sword technique with one strike. Come up and try it. Su Wenbin was so angry that he laughed. His grip on his sword was even tighter. He admitted that he had indeed shown off a little when he was practicing his sword technique, making his sword technique look rather flashy and eye-catching. However, so what? Even so, Su Wenbin was confident that unless it was a prodigy on the sword roll, it would be difficult for anyone to break his startling rainbow sword technique. Yi Guqin walked up to the arena calmly. With a flick of his wrist, he took out a sword that he had bought casually. It was just an ordinary mystical runic divine weapon. Su Wenbin said with a cold face, in order to let you lose willingly, I will not use my true qi. When the time comes, don't say that I used my true qi to pressure you. As soon as he finished speaking, Su Wenbin swept out with his sword. The sword light was as bright and dazzling as a rainbow, almost blinding everyone's eyes. What a powerful sword force. Zhuo Qiuqing, Zhen Lang, and the others also looked carefully with tense expressions. Big Brother's swordsmanship is invincible. Su Jingjing was quite confident about this. Qin Paisai had a curious look on her face. The only person present who was worried about Yi Guqin was probably Han Lingxian. Yi Guqin's expression was calm and grave when he saw the dazzling sword light. Heh! Scared silly. Su Wenbin could not help sneering when he saw Yi Guqin standing there in a daze. Just as Su Wenbin's sword was about to land on Yi Guqin's body, Yi Guqin finally drew his sword. Swoosh! Yi Guqin flicked his wrist, and the tip of his sword vibrated. A sword light swept across like a twinkling star. Although there was no trace of true qi, the sword light seemed to illuminate the sky and cut through the stars in the sky. Clang! The ear-piercing sound of metal colliding burst forth. The crowd only felt a sword light sweep past like lightning. Then, the scene froze. Everyone cast their gazes at the arena and saw a scene that shocked them beyond belief. The tip of Yi Guqin's sword was pressed against Su Wenbin's neck. The atmosphere froze. The faces of the elites of Skywind Ridge were frozen with indescribable astonishment. Su Wenbin, who was considered a top genius in Skywind Ridge, was defeated in one move. Even the sword in his hand was sent flying out of his hand and fell off the stage. No one was able to react in time. What was going on? Qin Paisai was dumbfounded. She had originally wanted to watch the show, but the scene in front of her was completely out of her expectations. Han Lingxian was also very surprised. She felt a little dazed and like she was in a dream. Zuiqiu Qing, Zhen Lang, and the other geniuses were also in disbelief. As for the Su family, Su House's face turned pale as if he had been struck by lightning. Su Jingjing rubbed her eyes, thinking that she was hallucinating. However, when she looked again, it was still the same. This is impossible. Su Jingjing could not help but shout. On the other hand, young Master Yu, who had been hidden under the hood and ignored by everyone, was surprised. Although he did not take Su Wenbin seriously, he was still considered a genius. He did not expect his sword move to be so easily broken. The person who saw it the clearest was Qin Zhen, who was at the fifth heaven of the Venerable Realm. Huh? Could it be that there will be a day when I misjudge someone? Although this kid doesn't have any Zhen Qi or soul fluctuations, his proficiency in sword skills is astonishing. Qin Zhen's eyes revealed a look of surprise. In the beginning, he also thought that Yi Guqin was a grandstander. But now, it seemed that was not the case. In the arena, Su Wenbin's body was trembling. He was not afraid, but angry. His face was ashen. He really only used one move. The star-like sword light was so fast that he did not even have time to react. In the blink of an eye, the sword in his hand was sent flying. Strange. Su Wenbin felt that the young man in front of him was very strange. However, just as Su Wenbin could not hold back his anger and was about to unleash his true qi, Yi Guqin's sword was pressed tightly against Su Wenbin's neck. The cold blade caused Su Wenbin to have goosebumps all over his body. Why? Do you want to use your true qi? Yi Guqin's gaze was deep. Su Wenbin suppressed the anger in his heart and said coldly, "Am I such a person who goes back on his word? Don't show off such a sword skill." Yi Guqin slapped Su Wenbin's chest with his sword and blasted him out of the arena. You! Su Wenbin was so angry that his heart was about to explode. Shame! To him, this was an unprecedented humiliation. Qin Paisai's gaze turned to Su Wenbin, her gaze turning colder. She thought that Su Wenbin's sword skill was superb, but it turned out that it was just for show. Feeling her gaze, Su Wenbin clenched his fists tightly and his face turned purple. At this moment, Yi Guqin's gaze suddenly turned to Qin Zhen, who was sitting on the main seat. He said in a calm tone, "Tianfeng Lord, I want to make a deal with you. What do you think?" "Oh, let's hear it." Qin Zhen raised his eyelids. Yi Guqin did not show off his amazing sword skill, so Qin Zhen would not bother to answer him. However, Yi Guqin's performance did surprise him. Han Lingxian suddenly understood that the reason why Yi Guqin went to the arena to compete with Su Wenbin was not to show off his ability. He wanted to attract Qin Zhen's attention and then propose a deal. It's very simple. I guarantee that in the 5 academies selection, Tianfeng Ridge's geniuses will not be threatened by other regions' geniuses. Some of them will be able to enter the academy smoothly. But in exchange, I need the Lord's sacred medicine, Spirit Bodhi. As soon as Yi Guqin's voice fell, it set off a storm. No one had expected Yi Guqin to ask for the sacred medicine from Qin Zhen as soon as he opened his mouth. Don't you know your own identity and strength? You're really asking for too much. Su Jingjing reprimanded. Although Yi Guqin broke Su Wenbin's startling rainbow sword skill, that was under the condition that he did not use his true qi. Therefore, everyone disagreed with Yi Guqin's proposal. You only broke one sword skill and you're already so smug. Zhen Lang shook his head. However, at this moment, a faint arrogant voice sounded. Sorry, this Spirit Bodhi, I want it. The hooded young Master Yu slowly took a step forward and said with a tone of victory. Chapter 866. This is, inside the garden, a group of geniuses looked at the figure in a dark blue robe with a hood, their eyes filled with doubt. They had long noticed that the siblings, Su Wenbin and Su Jingjing, seemed to be rather respectful to that figure. But Su Wenbin did not take the initiative to introduce him, so no one went to talk to him. No one expected that at this moment, this figure would actually stand out and be determined to obtain the spirit Bodhi. Oh, the sacred medicine is indeed attractive, but there is only one spirit Bodhi, and it is a reward for the 5 academy selection. Why should I give it to you in advance? Qin Zhen said in a light tone. If not for the situation, how could Qin Zhen be willing to take out the sacred medicine as a reward? It was just that in this 5 academy selection, if no one from Tianfeng Ridge stood out, his position as the lord of Tianfeng Ridge would come to an end, and he would be pulled down by his opponents. Ha, my lord, you will give me the sacred elixir because only I can help the Skywind Ridge safely pass the selection of the 5 academies, the mysterious young Master Jade said confidently. Oh. Not only Qin Zhen, but the other geniuses present also looked at young Master Yu in surprise. Where did this mysterious young master get the confidence to say such words? Seeing this, Su Wenbin took a step forward and flashed a fawning smile at Qin Paisai. Paisai, in order to help you and Uncle Qin, I've spent a tremendous amount of effort to find this extraordinary genius. Oh, he is. Qin Paisai looked at the man curiously. Young Master Yu, please show your true face. Su Wenbin was waiting for this moment. Young Master Yu, could it be? Many geniuses were shocked, as if they had guessed something, and held their breaths. That young Master Jade slowly pulled down his hood, revealing a handsome face. He looked valiant and exuded an imposing aura. A powerful aura of an 8th stage heaven and earth spirit bridge surged out at the same time, forming a true chi storm that swept in all directions, and even the calm surface of the lake was set off waves. Everyone's eyes were filled with shock when they looked at that face. It's young Master Yu, ranked 65th on the sword ranking, Yu Yuankue. One of the prodigies exclaimed in shock. Sword ranking genius. In the entire sword dynasty, they were all famous existences. There were 100 geniuses on the sword roll. However, if the entire Sword Dynasty's 360 mountain ridges were evenly distributed, only one Heaven's Chosen was born in 3 territories. Most of the geniuses on the sword rankings were gathered in the Sword Dao Alliance's aristocratic families and the 5 great academies. There were very few prodigies left on the sword roll. No one in Qingfeng Garden had expected that Su Wenbin would invite a genius from the sword roll to attend the meeting. Moreover, it was Yu Yuankue who was ranked 65th. Although this ranking could not be considered very high, it was definitely not low either. At least in the younger generation of the Tianfeng Ridge, no one could beat Yu Yuankue. The genius of the sword list. Qin Zhen's eyes were also slightly shocked. A genius on the sword roll was not intimidating to him. After all, as a venerable one, he could easily suppress a genius on the sword roll. However, if there was a genius on the sword list in the enrollment of the 5 academies, people from other regions would have to think twice before targeting Tianfeng Ridge. This time, Su Wenbin had really invited a savior for Tianfeng Ridge. He really is a genius on the sword list. Qin Paisai covered her mouth with her small hand. Her heart was also shocked. Han Lingxuan's face was slightly pale. If Yu Yuankue had asked for the spirit Bodhi, with his status as a genius on the sword list, Qin Zhen might have seriously considered it. Compared to Yu Yuankue, Yi Guqin's status and strength were far inferior. Perhaps only a fool would choose Yi Guqin between the two. Now, many people were looking at Yi Guqin with a playful look in their eyes. Hee, a cripple with no cultivation actually dares to boast that he can protect Tianfeng Ridge's geniuses. Why, are you speechless now? Su Jingjing's words were merciless. Yi Guqin first beat up Su House, then broke Su Wenbin's sword technique with a sword. It could be said that he had embarrassed the Su family. Su Jingjing was also extremely disgusted with Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin did not argue. He remembered that when he was at the sword list shrine, he had also seen this young Master Yu. He did not expect him to be a genius on the sword list. Yi Guqin had recovered his cultivation, so it was not difficult for him to deal with Yu Yuankue. It was just that his strength had not recovered yet, so it was not convenient for him to make a move. Lord, is there still a need to consider this matter? The sacred medicine will be taken out sooner or later. Give it to me as soon as possible. If I can break through to the 9th stage, then I will have the strength to protect everyone. Yu Yuankuei said arrogantly with his hands behind his back. Young Master Yu is actually going to break through to the 9th stage. The surrounding geniuses' expressions changed. They finally understood that Yu Yuankuei wanted to obtain the spirit Bodhi to break through to the 9th stage. At that time, his position on the sword list would probably take a big step forward. Father, this might be the only way. Otherwise, Yu. Qin Paisai's eyes were moved. If another accident happened this time, Qin Zhen might not be able to keep his position as lord. This. Qin Zhen thought for a moment and seemed to have made a decision. Heavenly Wind Lord, I can also give it a try. Yi Guqin's tone was indifferent. He did not lower himself. It was just that when he saw this opportunity, he was unwilling to give it up so easily. If he could obtain the spirit Bodhi, Yi Guqin not only had the confidence to recover his cultivation, but also had the possibility of advancing further. If he could break through to the heaven and earth spirit bridge, then most of the geniuses on the sword list would have nothing to fear. Do you still have the right to speak here? Su Wenbin coldly reprimanded. Zhuo Qiuqing, Zhen Lang, and the others also looked at Yi Guqin with a strange expression. Yu Yuankuei's identity had been revealed. What courage did Yi Guqin have to compete with the sword list geniuses for the sacred medicine? Even Qin Paisai tugged at the corner of Han Lingshuan's clothes and said, Sister Lingxian, let your friend rest. Now is not the time to cause trouble. But Han Lingxian bit her lips. She knew that if Yi Guqin wanted to recover from his injuries, he had to obtain the sacred medicine. No need to say any more. I have already made up my mind. Young Master Yu, this time, the geniuses of the heavenly wind ridge are in your hands, Qin Zhen said. Ha, my lord's eyes are as bright as torches. I will not disappoint you. Yu Yuankuei was not surprised at all. He cupped his hands and smiled faintly. Miss Han, let's go. Yi Guqin saw this and did not insist. Qin Zhen had eyes but could not see the jade. There was nothing he could do. Han Lingxian nodded slightly and was about to leave with Yi Guqin. At this moment, Yu Yuankuei looked over and smiled faintly. Oh, right. Other than the sacred medicine, I want one more thing. What is it? Qin Zhen frowned slightly. I want her. Yu Yuankuei pointed at Han Lingxian. Yi Guqin raised his eyebrows coldly. Chapter 867. The entire Qingfeng garden quieted down. Yu Yuankuei pointed at Han Lingxian with an indifferent expression, as if he was choosing a treasure that he liked. Yi Guqin's expression was cold. Han Lingshuan's beautiful eyes were filled with anger. What did Yu Yuankuei think she was? A commodity that could be obtained easily? Even Qin Zhen frowned and said, Young Master Yu, what do you mean? Nothing, I want the spirit Bodhi and this woman. As long as you agree, I can help Tianfeng Ridge. Yu Yuankuei said arrogantly. Young Master Yu, she is my best friend. Qin Paisai's expression changed slightly. Yu Yuankuei was not moved at all. With a playful smile, he said, My lord, princess, my words are here. As long as there is Ling Bodhi and this woman, leave the selection of the 5 academies to me. If there is one less, then I can't be bothered to care. This. Qin Paisai's expression froze as she bit her lips. Qin Zhen furrowed his brows. No matter what, he was still the lord of a ridge. If he forcibly tied a woman to Yu Yuankuei, his reputation would be ruined. Young Master Yu, are you humiliating me? Han Lingxian was so angry that her face turned pale. She had thought that most of the geniuses on the sword list were magnanimous people. She did not expect that there would be someone as shameless as Yu Yuankuei. This made Han Lingshuan's delicate body tremble. Ha! Isn't it better to follow me than to follow that useless person beside you? Yu Yuankue said arrogantly. Don't confuse you with young Master Dugu. Han Lingshuan's beautiful face turned cold as she reprimanded. Yi Guqin's eyes were cold. Although Han Lingxian and he had not known each other for long, they could be considered friends. Yu Yuankue's actions were really digging his own grave. I'm sorry, young Master Yu. We can agree to any other conditions, but Sister Lingxian is my best friend. If she does not want to follow you, we can't force her. Qin Paisai took a deep breath and said. She did have some principles. Although she wanted to rope in Yu Yuankue, she didn't want to do it this way. Pei Si, young Master Yu's request isn't too excessive. Su Wenbin said. From his point of view, exchanging a woman for Yu Yuankue's help was simply worth it. That's right, Princess. Only by relying on young Master Yu can we have a chance against the Yellow Dragon Ridge and the Purple Smoke Ridge. Princess, you have to think about us too. Every time the 5 academies recruit students, we are targeted very badly. This time, young Master Yu is willing to help us. What's wrong with fulfilling his request? Qin Paisai seemed to have the intention to refuse. The other young talents in Qingfeng Garden also began to jeer. In their opinion, if not for Yu Yuankue's help, they would have been completely wiped out this time. You. Qin Paisai was speechless for a moment. Han Lingshuan's gaze swept across everyone present. When those people met Han Lingshuan's gaze, they all looked away guiltily. Ha! Han Lingxian laughed bitterly. In order to win over Yu Yuankue so that they could enter the 5 academies, this group of young talents from the Sky Wind Ridge did not hesitate to push her out. At this moment, Han Lingshuan's heart felt as if it had fallen into an ice cave. She felt an unprecedented loneliness. However, just as Han Lingxian was feeling helpless, a thin but tall figure stood in front of her. Young Master Dugu. Han Lingxian raised her head. When she saw this figure, her heart was moved and her eyes became slightly moist. This is the genius of the Sky Wind Ridge. Yi Guqin smiled coldly. What do you mean by this? That's right. You have no right to speak now. Don't think that you can be arrogant just because you were lucky enough to break young Master Su's sword move. Seeing Yi Guqin stand out and protect Han Lingxian, the group of geniuses felt a little awkward. This was because in comparison, they appeared to be very shameless. Therefore, they became even more angry and targeted. Are you really sword cultivators? For the sake of your own future, you can casually sacrifice a woman. Are you worthy of the swords in your hands? If the geniuses of the Sword Dynasty are all people like you, then I will be disappointed. Yi Guqin stood with his hands clasped behind his back. His cold words were like a clap of thunder that exploded in the Qingfeng Garden. All the young talents were stunned. Immediately, their faces flushed red and their ears turned red. Yi Guqin's words were undoubtedly tearing off their hypocritical faces. Ignorant ants. The name of the Sword Dynasty is not something that a cripple like you can slander, Su Wenbin scolded angrily. Ha! If the Sword Dynasty is all people like you, then it's fine if you don't come. Yi Guqin waved his hand and said coldly. Back then, Kenpo sincerely invited Yi Guqin to join the Sword Dynasty and the Sword Alliance. Yi Guqin was a little curious. However, after seeing the scene in front of him, he was slightly disappointed. Of course, perhaps this was just a glimpse of the big picture. It could only be said that the geniuses of the Skywind Ridge were too unsightly. Princess, my patience is limited. If you really want to protect your best friend, then let's forget about this matter. Yu Yuankue waved his hand. Young Master Yu, can't you change your conditions? Qin Paisai's face turned pale. Without Yu Yuankue, it would be difficult for the Skywind Ridge to achieve anything this time. Alright, Paisai. If you are still hesitating, then I can only tell you this news. Su Wenbin saw the situation in front of him and his expression changed. What is it? The surrounding geniuses all held their breaths. Although young Master Yu is very humble and low-key and doesn't want to expose himself, under the current circumstances, he has no choice but to say it. I'm sure all of you know about the mysterious sword demon who has been causing a stir in the capital of Skywind recently, Su Wenbin said lightly. Of course we know him. He is the sword demon who has broken the moves of many geniuses on the sword ranking. He even broke Hua Wuxiu's move. Yes, does young Master Su have news about the sword demon? Su Wenbin's words caused a stir in the atmosphere. Su Jingjing swayed her body and walked out. Her beautiful face was filled with admiration. She looked at Yu Yuankue and said with great admiration, to be honest, the sword demon's real body is young Master Yu. What? Like a stone that caused 1,000 ripples. All the geniuses in the Qingfeng garden stared at Yu Yuankue with their mouths agape. Their eyes were filled with extreme shock. The mysterious sword demon who had been the talk of the town recently was actually Yu Yuankue? That day at the sword-ranking Divine Palace, it was us who brought young Master Yu there. At that time, other than him, who else had the ability to break the moves of the geniuses on the sword ranking? Su Wenbin said truthfully. That's right. We saw it with our own eyes. Young Master Yu has always been humble and low-key, so he is unwilling to admit it. Su Jingjing also added fuel to the fire. However, they didn't notice the embarrassment in Yu Yuankue's eyes. These two idiots. Yu Yuankue wanted to slap the Su siblings in his heart. That day, he had said that it was a misunderstanding. In the end, the Su siblings had misunderstood him as modesty. But now, looking at the countless respectful and admiring gazes, Yu Yuankue found it hard to explain. Chapter 868. This. Young Master Yu is the sword demon. Qin Paisai's body trembled, and her eyes were filled with disbelief. Previously, she had been feeling regretful. If she had been able to recruit the sword demon, the 5 academies selection would have been a cinch for the Tianfeng Ridge. However, the sword demon had disappeared without a trace, and no one knew who he was. Now, the Su siblings were saying that Yu Yuankue was the sword demon. With the Su siblings' reputation in the Tianfeng Ridge, they wouldn't lie, and Yu Yuankue didn't refute. Everyone was almost certain that the sword demon was Yu Yuankue. No wonder the sword demon is young Master Yu. That's right. It's been a long time since the sword demon appeared in the Tianfeng Ridge. There's no doubt that the sword demon appeared at the same time as young Master Yu. Ah, I didn't expect young Master Yu to be so low-key. He hid it from us. The geniuses in the garden couldn't help but look at Yu Yuankue with admiration. Being able to break Hua Wuxiu's sword move, even if it was just a shadow, was admirable. Oh. Paisai, you don't have any objections now, do you? Su Wenbin smiled faintly. Qin Paisai bit her pink lips and couldn't say a word. If it was only Yu Yuankue, she could argue. However, with the sword demon's identity, even if she wanted to protect Han Lingxian, Qin Zhen wouldn't allow it. Sure enough, Qin Zhen's eyes lit up and he said, I didn't expect young Master Yu to be the sword demon. Since you have such strength, you are the best guarantee for the 5 academies selection. I agree. Father, you. Qin Paisai wanted to say something, but stopped. Yu Yuankue's eyes flashed. He didn't admit it, nor did he deny it. If he continued to make the same mistake, he would be able to obtain what he needed. He is the sword demon. Han Lingxuan's face was pale, and her lips were as white as paper. Her heart sank. With this identity, Yu Yuankue's weight was undoubtedly heavier. Yi Guqin frowned slightly. He knew the truth. But who would have thought that Yu Yuankue would safely substitute the plum tree for the peach tree? Thinking of this, Yi Guqin stepped forward and said in a calm tone, Yu Yuankue, are you sure you are the sword demon? Audacious. What qualifications do you have to question young Master Yu? Su Wenbin berated. This person's jealousy is really scary. He's feeling down and can't bear to see others doing well. Su Jingjing crossed her arms in front of her chest and sneered coldly. When these words were spoken, many of the surrounding gazes were filled with disgust. Although Yiguchin's sword strike had been stunning, it was still not enough. But in the end, it was only a sword technique and not his full strength. In the eyes of these prodigies, Yiguchin was just a mortal who was proficient in sword techniques but had no cultivation. Even Qin Paisai, who had always been on Han Lingshuan's side, remained silent. Yiguchin's words were indeed filled with jealousy. I believe in young Master Dugu. Han Lingxian stood beside Yiguchin. You want him to save you. Of course you believe in him. One of the prodigies sneered disdainfully. Just as the situation reached a stalemate. Suddenly, the sound of a flute drifted faintly. It was extremely ethereal and carried with it a misty rain in Jiangnan. Hey, where did that flute come from? Everyone was surprised. Sword will. I can feel a trace of sword will in that flute. A young man said with a look of disbelief. A faint voice drifted over from afar. So you are the sword demon. What a surprise. Suddenly, misty rain fell in Qingfeng Garden. On the surface of the sapphire lake, a thin figure stood abruptly. He wore a bamboo hat and a black veil fluttered in the wind. He stood on the surface of the lake like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water, causing small ripples. His aura was not exposed, but it gave off a deep and serene feeling. Oh, he is. Everyone's eyes fell on the man in the bamboo hat standing in the middle of the lake. It's you, Yan Chou Ku. Yu Yuankue's expression changed slightly. Yan Chou Ku. He is Yan Chou Ku, ranked 40th on the sword roll. The crowd was in an uproar as the prodigy's eyes widened. What they had seen and heard today was like a dream to them. In the past Tianfeng grand banquets, there was not a single prodigy on the sword roll. But this time, there were 2 prodigies on the sword roll, and their rankings were not low either. Yan Chou Ku was ranked 40th on the sword roll. He was even stronger than Yu Yuankue, who was ranked 65th, his real body is here. Yiguchin looked up slightly. Previously at the Sword Roll Divine Palace, Yiguchin had also cracked Yan Chou Ku's Misty Rain illusory sword. It had to be said that Yan Chou Ku was quite skilled in sword Dao. It was just that his opponent was Yiguchin. Ha, Yan Chou Ku, it's really surprising that you would appear in Tianfeng Ridge to participate in the Tianfeng banquet. However, I welcome you with open arms, Qinzhen said with a laugh. Although he did not know why Yan Chou Ku had suddenly appeared here, if he could rope him in, then the 5 colleges' enrollment would be in the bag. I have always been a wanderer and have no fixed abode. I only came to Tianfeng Ridge by chance. But this time, I am not here to participate in the Tianfeng banquet, but for him. Yan Chou Ku pointed his flute at Yu Yuankue. Everyone's expression changed. Could it be that there was some friction between the 2 prodigies on the sword roll? I didn't expect that my Misty Rain illusory sword would be cracked by someone, and that sword demon is actually you. I also saw the video recording in the Sword Roll Divine Palace. I didn't expect your sword skills to reach such a level. It seems that it won't be long before your ranking on the sword roll surpasses mine, Yan Chou Ku said with a hint of admiration. Everyone was enlightened when they heard this. So Yan Chou Ku was here to find Sword Demon who had cracked the Misty Rain illusory sword. That was equivalent to looking for Yu Yuankue. This. Yu Yuankue was stunned and did not know how to respond. He did not expect Yan Chou Ku to come to Tianfeng Ridge. He also did not expect Yan Chou Ku to come directly to the Tianfeng banquet. Yu Yuankue had always been arrogant because of his status as a prodigy on the sword roll. However, he was not qualified to put on airs in front of Yan Chou Ku. There was a difference of 25 places between the 2 of them on the sword roll. This was already a huge gap. In Yu Yuankue's eyes, the prodigies of Tianfeng Ridge were like chickens and dogs. However, in front of Yan Chou Ku, Yu Yuankue was also a chicken and a dog. Ha, of course. Young Master Yu has always kept a low profile. If we didn't speak up because we couldn't stand it anymore, I'm afraid you wouldn't know that Sword Demon is young Master Yu. Su Jingjing's face was full of pride as she puffed out her chest. However, she did not notice that Yu Yuankui, who was standing behind her, had a slightly unnatural expression. Only he knew that he was not Sword Demon. However, with the revelation of the Su siblings, Yu Yuankui had turned a blind eye and climbed up the ladder in order to obtain the sacred medicine spirit Bodhi and Han Lingxian. He had never expected Yan Cho-ku to come. That's great. I'm here today to prove the loopholes of the Misty Rain illusory sword. I hope young master you will not be stingy with your guidance. Yan Cho-ku swung his flute, causing the entire lake to ripple. In the misty rain, Yan Cho-ku's aura of a ninth-stage spirit bridge of heaven and earth completely erupted. It suppressed all the prodigies present. Yu Yuankui's face turned stiff and pale, like the face of a dead person. Chapter 869. Smoky Worry Guest was very reserved when he was quiet, making it difficult to gauge his strength. But at this moment, his aura caused ripples on the surface of the lake. The misty rain made Smoky Worry Guest look even more mysterious and profound. This sword roll prodigy is not to be underestimated. Yi Guqin was slightly surprised when he felt the pressure from Smoky Worry Guest. Although the sword roll prodigies were not as strong as he had imagined, there were still experts among them. Yi Guqin did not have such a feeling when facing the phantom. But now, facing the real person, the fluctuation of sword intent was even stronger than the phantom's. However, this kind of power did not affect Yi Guqin much. But to the Skywind Ridge prodigies present, it was extremely oppressive. Is this the strength of the 40th on the sword roll? He is indeed powerful. Indeed, but his sword move was broken by young Master Yu. Young Master Yu is definitely not weaker than him. The prodigies present all felt the pressure and retreated to the side. Yi Guqin glanced at Yu Yuankui nonchalantly. He wanted to know how Yu Yuankui would get out of this situation. Smoky Worry Guest's reputation is not just for show. Su Wenbin's face was solemn. Even the top prodigies of the Skywind Ridge were nothing in front of the sword roll prodigies. So what? Young Master Yu has broken the Misty Rain illusory sword. Are you afraid of Smoky Worry Guest? Su Jingjing was not flustered and was full of confidence in Yu Yuankui. Yu Yuankui's face stiffened and he clenched his fists. He exhaled deeply and said, Smoky Worry Guest is holding the Skywind banquet. It's not good to fight during the banquet. Yu Yuankui's words were out of helplessness. He could not really fight Smoky Worry Guest in front of everyone. With his current strength, fighting Smoky Worry Guest was just asking for a beating. As for breaking the Misty Rain illusory sword, he was not the sword demon, so how could he break the Misty Rain illusory sword? That was why Yu Yuankui said that. Don't worry. The Skywind Banquet is a banquet for prodigies to exchange pointers. Young Master Yu, don't worry. Qin Zhen waved his hand. Yes, young Master Yu, it's good to show your strength. Zuiqiu Qing was overjoyed. She was a battle maniac, so she hoped to see the battle between the two geniuses on the sword rankings. Young Master Yu, don't refuse. That's right, let us witness the sword demon's power. The other prodigies also laughed and jeered. Yu Yuankui clenched his fists and suppressed the trembling of his body. He took a deep breath and tried his best to remain calm. How about this? After the banquet, we will not be disturbed and will fight alone. Yu Yuankui continued to find excuses. There's no need to go through all that trouble. I can't wait to see the means you use to crack the Misty Rain illusory sword. There's no need to worry about me. Even if I lose to you, I'll accept it wholeheartedly, said worried Smog sincerely. Puff. Yu Yuankui felt like vomiting blood. It was already good enough that he could exchange 2 blows with Yen Worried Guest. How could he possibly defeat him? However, right at this moment, the Su siblings opened their mouths again. Indeed, I've seen young Master Yu's sword move with my own eyes. It's like a stroke of genius. It's unforgettable, praised Su Wenbin. Young Master Yu's sword move should only exist in the heavens. It is indeed simple to crack the Misty Rain illusory sword. Young Master Yu, there's no need for you to be so humble, said Su Jingjing with a face full of admiration. You Yuankui pointed at the Su siblings with a trembling hand. Were the two of them helping him or harming him? Yuankui was so angry that he wanted to strangle the Su siblings to death. However, with so many people watching, he could not make things difficult for them. Oh. Young Master Yu, are you looking down on me and can't be bothered to fight me? Worried Smog frowned slightly under his bamboo hat. Worried Smog came here to humbly seek guidance from the sword demon. However, if Yuankui maintains such an attitude, anyone would be displeased. Not at all. Let's just exchange a few blows, said Yuankui bitterly. If there was no way to dodge, he could only casually exchange a few blows. With a tap of his foot, Worried Smog landed in the arena. Yuankui slowly walked up the arena as sweat dripped down his back and forehead. Let's begin. As a form of respect, I will use all my strength to see how you crack the Misty Rain illusory sword. With that said, Worried Smog's figure dissipated like a mist. No good. Yuankui's heart palpitated as he hurriedly dodged to the side. He was an elite ranked 65th on the sword roll after all. He had some skill. Unfortunately, his opponent was Worried Smog, leaving him in a tight spot. Worried Smog held his flute as sword chi rose up like smoke, enveloping Yuankui. Everyone, watch carefully. Next, it will be the moment young Master Yu cracks the Misty Rain illusory sword. Su Wenbin warned loudly. After being reminded by him, everyone's gazes were fixed on the two people who were fighting. However, few. Sword chi surged in the smoke, followed by grunts and the sound of blood spewing. A figure was sent retreating pathetically from the Misty Rain sword chi. His dark blue clothes were tattered and his skin was torn as blood seeped out. He was none other than Yuankui. The atmosphere instantly turned from fiery to dead silence. The crowd was dumbfounded, as though they had seen a ghost. What happened to cracking the Misty Rain illusory sword? Su Wenbin was also dumbfounded. His face was filled with astonishment and confusion. This shouldn't be. Su Jingjing's eyes widened as her mind was filled with questions. Everyone present was baffled by the scene before them. In the arena, Yuankui staggered back and could not help but spit out another mouthful of blood. His body was covered in wounds. Worried Smog was certain that he was the sword demon that had cracked the Misty Rain illusory sword. Therefore, he did not hold back in his attack, believing that young Master Yu could easily crack it. But now, young Master Yu, what's the matter with you? Worried Smog's voice sank slightly. Yuankui was speechless. His body was bleeding from his wounds and he felt aggrieved. This was simply lifting a rock and smashing it on his own feet. I understand now. Are you looking down on me? That's why you held back. Worried Smog's eyes under his bamboo hat were as cold as two cold swords. Yes, that's right. Young Master, you must have held back. That's why he did this. Su Jingjing seemed to want to defend Yuankui. Shut up, you pig. Yuankui was so angry that he spat out another mouthful of blood. He could not hold it in any longer. He glared at Su Jingjing and scolded her. Young Master Yu. Su Jingjing was stunned and her lips were trembling. The man she adored actually called her a pig in front of everyone? How could a girl accept such a thing? Alright, I'm not the sword demon. Yuankui threw caution to the wind. If he did not come clean, he might really be beaten half to death by Worried Smog. What? The crowd was silent. Everyone was dumbfounded. Yuankui, you're still refusing at this time. How much do you look down on me? I've improved the Misty Rain illusory sword over the past few days. You can try cracking it again. Worried Smog clearly believed that Yuankui was looking down on him and was unwilling to use his full strength. For a swordsman, this was definitely a humiliation. Take this. Worried Smog's aura exploded. The misty rain illusory sword swept toward Yu Yuankuei like a storm. Please stop. Yu Yuankuei's expression changed completely. He cried out involuntarily. Although he tried his best to block, there was still a big gap between him and Worried Smog. Then, his body was buried in the misty rain of swords. All that could be heard was a shrill scream that sounded like a pig being slaughtered. Chapter 870. After a full quarter of an hour, Smoky Worry Guest finally stopped. His thin figure was like a bamboo tree, standing straight and upright. His face under the bamboo hat was puzzled as he looked at the spot where the sword chi lingered. Cough, cough, a violent coughing sound was heard. The Su siblings, Zuoqiu Qing, Zhen Lang, Qin Paisai, Han Lingxian, and even Qin Zhen were watching. Yu Yuankuei slowly crawled out. His clothes were torn by the sword chi and hung on his body like rags. His body was covered with countless sword wounds and blood oozed out, making him look like a bloody man. Yu Yuankuei's hair was disheveled and his mouth and chin were covered in blood. He looked like a beggar who had stolen a steamed bun and was being ganged up on. He didn't look like a genius on the sword roll at all. This can't be real. Su Jingjing shook her head. The figure she admired in her heart had completely collapsed. What's going on? Su Wenbin was also stunned as if he had been petrified. No matter how modest Yu Yuankuei was to Yen Worried Guest, it was impossible for him to be so modest. It didn't look like he was holding back at all. He was really beaten to a pulp. Don't tell me this is real. Am I hallucinating? Why do I feel that young Master Yu isn't the sword demon? The geniuses present were all in a daze. Some of them had seen the images left in the Sword Roll Divine Palace. The sword demon had indeed easily broken Yen Worried Guest's Misty Rain illusory sword within 100 moves. But now, no matter how modest Yu Yuankuei was, it was impossible for him to be in such a sorry state. The result was obvious. Yu Yuankuei wasn't the sword demon. When they thought of this, everyone present turned their questioning and indignant gazes towards the Su siblings. The two of them had deceived everyone present. No, we did see it. Su Wenbin's face was pale. Especially when Qin Zhen's cold gaze swept over them, the Su siblings trembled like quails. The pressure of a fifth heaven venerable was not easy to bear. With a plop, under the powerful pressure, the Su siblings' legs went soft, and they collapsed to the ground. Where was the arrogance from before? Well done. Qin Zhen frowned. If it weren't for the fact that the brother and sister were from the Su family, Qin Zhen definitely wouldn't have let them off so easily. What's going on? Worried Smoker also noticed that something was wrong. He originally believed that Yu Yuankuei had cracked the Misty Rain illusory sword, so he looked down on him and felt it beneath him to fight him. But from the looks of it, Yu Yuankuei had indeed failed to crack his Misty Rain illusory sword. Instead, he had been left in a rather pathetic state. Even if Yu Yuankuei was not weak, there was no way he could be his opponent. I have already said that it was a misunderstanding. I am not the sword demon, and I have never admitted that I am the sword demon. Yu Yuankuei shouted angrily as he wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. Now that he had been exposed, there was no need for him to hide anything. So it's like that, since Yu Yuankuei had personally admitted it, everyone no longer had any doubts. But didn't young Master Yu go that day? We all saw it with our own eyes. Besides you, who else has that kind of strength? Su Jingjing said in a daze. You two stupid pigs. It would have been better if Su Jingjing had not said it, but the moment she said it, Yu Yuankuei became angry. If it were not for the two of them, Yu Yuankuei would not have taken advantage of the situation and ended up in such a disgraceful state. He could not take it anymore. He walked down the arena and slapped Su Wenbin and Su Jingjing in the face. Smack! 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 The two of them were hit so hard that they felt dizzy. Su Jingjing's beautiful face was swollen. Young Master Yu, we are still members of the Su family. Su Wenbin gritted his teeth and said. So what? I am still a member of the Sword Dao Alliance's Yu family. Yu Yuankue's eyes were bloodshot. Everyone fell silent. But at this moment, Han Lingxian said with a cold face, you knew it was a misunderstanding, but you did not explain yourself. You wanted to use this opportunity to get the sacred medicine and me. How can someone like you become a genius on the sword ranking? The accusation made Yu Yuankue's face extremely gloomy. Although the surrounding men and women did not dare to say anything, the disdain hidden in their eyes could not be erased. As a genius on the sword ranking, he actually allowed others to misunderstand him as the sword demon. It was indeed a disgrace. I see. Yu Yuankue, you are a disgrace to us on the sword ranking. Let this injury be your punishment. Yan Worried Traveler originally felt a little guilty for finding the wrong person and injuring Yu Yuankue by mistake. But now, he felt no guilt. He treated it as a lesson to Yu Yuankue. Yan Worried Traveler, don't be arrogant. I am not the only one on the sword ranking from the Yu family. Yu Yuankue said coldly. That person is indeed not bad. But unfortunately, you are not her. Yan Worried Traveler's expression did not change. What he cared about was the sword demon who had cracked his Misty Rain illusory sword. Yan Worried Traveler had a premonition that if he could find the sword demon and humbly ask for guidance, his Misty Rain illusory sword would definitely improve. Thinking of this, Yan Worried Traveler looked around as if he was looking for something. Does Yan Worried Traveler think that the sword demon is among us? Some people noticed Yan Worried Traveler's behavior and asked in surprise. How is that possible? Who here could be the sword demon? Many people shook their heads in disapproval. Even Yu Yuankue, a genius on the sword ranking, was not the sword demon. How could the geniuses of the Skywind Ridge be the sword demon? Besides, all the geniuses present knew each other very well. Yan Worried Traveler, you don't have to search. There is no sword demon here. Some people said. Yan Worried Traveler's gaze suddenly landed on Yiguchen. Yiguchen stood there calmly and looked very calm. Everyone's gaze also turned to Yiguchen. Immediately, there were many sneers. There's no need to look. This person has no cultivation. That's right. Anyone could be the sword demon, but he is the least likely. Zuiqiu Qing, Zhen Lang, and the others also casually glanced at him before looking away. In their eyes, it was indeed a ridiculous assumption that Yiguchen was the sword demon. Even Han Lingxian, who trusted Yiguchen the most, did not think that Yiguchen was the sword demon. After all, to break Hua Wuxiu's sword move, it was not something that could be done with comprehension alone. Yan Worried Traveler took a deep look at Yiguchen. After sensing that Yiguchen did not have any true qi or soul fluctuations, he looked away in disappointment. It seems that the sword demon is really not here. That's right. With his superb sword skills, he is either a disciple of the Five Academies' Holy Emblem or a disciple of a foreign overlord force. Yan Worried Traveler shook his head. Before Qin Zhen and the others could persuade him to stay, he turned into a puff of smoke and dissipated. Sigh, what a pity. Qin Paisai's eyes were filled with disappointment. Then, the atmosphere of the Heavenly Wind banquet became strange. Feeling the suffocating atmosphere, Yu Yuankue said to Qin Zhen with a sullen face, Heavenly Wind Lord, my words still count. If you give me the sacred medicine and this woman, I will still agree to help. At the beginning, when he said this, he had received praise and flattery from the crowd. But now that he had spoken, the atmosphere was silent and awkward. Yu Yuankue deliberately hid the misunderstanding about the sword demon, and with his current sorry state, it was hard to believe him. Young Master Yu, we will discuss this later. If you want to stay, you can stay, Qin Zhen said lightly. In other words, he would only fulfill his promise after young Master Yu helped. Alright, Heavenly Wind Lord, since you don't trust me, let's not talk about it. Yu Yuankue's face was cold. He would not help the Heavenly Wind Lord because he was a member of the Yu family. and the Yu family was on the side of the aristocratic families. Qin Zhen was on the side of the rogue cultivators. So you were really lying to us. Qin Paisai gritted her teeth and said indignantly. Who asked the two idiots of the Su family to invite me here? But since you don't know what's good for you, I promise that no one from the Heavenly Wind Ridge will be able to join the 5 academies selection. Yu Yuankue snorted. His whole body was injured, but he was still arrogant. He was not afraid of Qin Zhen attacking him because he was a member of the aristocratic family of the Way of the Sword. If Qin Zhen really did something to him, it would be difficult for him to keep his position as the Heavenly Wind Lord. Then I won't see you off. Qin Zhen waved his sleeve, and a strong wind rushed out and blew Yu Yuankue away. Yu Yuankue's body flew backward and landed on the ground with a loud crash. His cold eyes swept over everyone present and finally landed on Yi Guqin. If it were not for Yi Guqin's question, none of this would have happened. Just you wait. Yu Yuankue left with a sullen face. Chapter 871. With Yu Yuankue's departure, the entire Tianfeng banquet fell silent. All the geniuses did not look too good. Yu Yuankue was from the Yu family, a sword family. In the Sword Dao Alliance, although the Yu family could not be compared to a pseudo-saint family like the Hua family, they still had a 9th heaven venerable in charge. Even Qin Zhen, the lord of Tianfeng Ridge, did not want to go against the Yu family. This was also the reason why Qin Zhen did not suppress Yu Yuankue despite his arrogant words. Now that Tianfeng Ridge had offended Yu Yuankue, they would undoubtedly be targeted by Yu Yuankue during the selection. Sigh. Qin Zhen looked tired. Father. Qin Paisai frowned and then glared at Su Wenbin. It's all because of you that we invited Yu Yuankue. Now we've suffered a double loss and offended him. Su Wenbin and Su Jingjing felt the angry gazes from the surrounding geniuses. Their throats were dry and they could not speak. Then, Su Wenbin seemed to have thought of something and suddenly turned to Yi Guqin. It's all because of him. If he had not provoked us, we would not have become enemies with Yu Yuankue. Su Wenbin's eyes were bloodshot as he glared at Yi Guqin. If Yi Guqin had not interfered, none of this would have happened. You're shameless. You misunderstood Yu Yuankue as the sword demon, but now you're blaming Yu Dugu. Han Lingxian scolded coldly. She was now more and more disgusted with the Tianfeng Ridge geniuses. With Yi Guqin's temperament, he could not be bothered to argue with a villain like Su Wenbin. He looked at Qin Zhen and said lightly, Tianfeng Ridge Lord, the promise I made before still stands. Hearing Yi Guqin's words, the surrounding geniuses were surprised. Not to mention that Yi Guqin had no cultivation. Even if he had, he would definitely be targeted by the Yu family in the selection of the 5 academies since he had provoked Yu Yuankue. Under such circumstances, Yi Guqin still made a promise. In the eyes of the crowd, this was somewhat boastful. My lord, you mustn't believe this person. He's only here to swindle the sacred medicine, Su Wenbin said hurriedly. Although most of the surrounding geniuses disliked Su Wenbin, they did not think that he was wrong. With Yi Guqin's strength, it was indeed difficult to convince the masses. Qin Zhen was expressionless as he sized up Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin looked at him indifferently without the slightest hint of guilt. At this time, Han Lingxian gritted her teeth and suddenly knelt down in front of Qin Zhen. Sister Lingxian, what are you doing? Qin Paisai's expression changed slightly. Lord, please give the sacred medicine to young Master Dugu. Lingxian believes that young Master Dugu is definitely not someone who speaks nonsense, Han Lingxian said solemnly. What a joke. Do you mean that a cripple with no cultivation can help our Tianfeng Ridge fend off the geniuses of other ridges and even Yu Yuankue's revenge? Su Wenbin sneered. Yi Guqin was also slightly surprised. He did not expect Han Lingxian to go to this extent for him. Qin Zhen looked at Yi Guqin and said in a low voice, Dugu Wubai, right? You should know what will happen to you if you lie to me. If I can't fulfill my promise, I'm at your disposal, Yi Guqin said indifferently. Qin Zhen frowned. just when Su Wenbin and the others thought that Qin Jin would fly into a rage. Qin Jin flipped his wrist and a jade box fell into Yi Guqin's hand. This. All the geniuses were dumbfounded. Qin Jin actually believed Yi Guqin. Father, you. Qin Paisai was also slightly stunned. She knew that her father was very cautious. Otherwise, he would not have become the Ridge Lord with his background as a rogue cultivator. However, such a person actually gave the sacred medicine to Yi Guqin, who had no cultivation at all. No one dared to believe it. My lord, this, Su Wenbin wanted to say something, but Qin Jin waved his sleeve and said coldly, enough. The Tianfeng feast is over. Everyone can leave. Qin Jin was obviously in a bad mood after the incident with Yu Yuankue. The entire Tianfeng banquet ended in such a heavy atmosphere. All the geniuses of Tianfeng Ridge left worriedly. They were not optimistic about the 5 academies selection and thought that Tianfeng Ridge's future was bleak. If this person can protect my Tianfeng Ridge, I'll twist my head off and let him kick it like a ball. Su Wenbin snorted and left. Su Jingjing and the others also glared at Yi Guqin. Sigh, it seems that it will be difficult to enter the 5 academies this time. Even the battle maniacs Wuqiu Qing shook her head. Zhen Lang also thought so. All the sky prides heaved sighs. Just as Yi Guqin and Han Lingxian were about to leave, Qin Paisai called out to them. Sister Lingxian, you and young Master Dugu can stay in the Lord's mansion. You can take care of each other, Qin Paisai said. Are you afraid that we will escape? Yi Guqin was well aware of the situation. Then, Qin Paisai arranged for the servants to arrange the accommodations for Yi Guqin and Han Lingxian. Father, do you really believe in young Master Dugu? Qin Paisai asked when only the father and daughter were left. It's just intuition. Qin Jin waved his hand. In fact, he was not too sure why he would believe in a mortal. Perhaps it was because he saw Yi Guqin's deep and unfathomable eyes. Even when Yan Wuke and the others arrived, Yi Guqin's face did not change at all. That kind of calmness and confidence could not be faked. Only a true prodigy of the heavens could cultivate such an attitude of being unfazed by anything. Let's see if this lad can surprise me, Qin Jin muttered. On the other side, a housekeeper brought Yi Guqin and Han Lingxian to a quiet courtyard in the Lord's mansion. Miss Han, thank you, Yi Guqin said. He and Han Lingxian were not close. It was really surprising that Han Lingxian would do so much for him. I'm just thanking young Master Dugu for his kindness. Lingxian is also selfish. Han Lingxian pursed her lips and smiled faintly. Oh. Yi Guqin raised his eyebrows slightly. Lingxian has always felt that young Master Dugu's background is not simple. However, Lingxian will not probe into it. I hope that one day, Lingxian will be able to gain young Master Dugu's trust. Han Lingshuan's beautiful eyes shone. It had to be said that Han Lingxian was indeed a woman with a pure heart. I will. Yi Guqin nodded. That's good. However, regarding the 5 academies selection, I hope young Master Dugu will pay attention to it. This time's recruitment may be unprecedentedly difficult. Han Lingshuan's face was somewhat dignified. Because of the prodigy battlefield? Yi Guqin said thoughtfully. That's right. The prodigy battlefield is about to begin. Therefore, all the prodigies of the Sword Dynasty want to compete for the position of Sword Sun. This time, winning the Sword Sun battle is not just a qualification. You will also receive the full support of the Sword Dynasty. After all, the Sword Dynasty also wants to achieve a good result in the prodigy battlefield. Han Lingxian said. Is that so? But that's what makes it interesting. Yi Guqin said meaningfully. He was looking forward to the day when he became the Sword Sun or even the Jiankue. He was also looking forward to the day when the prodigy battlefield began. Because that would be the day when the name of the Sword Sect would once again appear in the world. Chapter 872. In the quiet room, Yi Guqin sat cross-legged and took out a jade box. Opening the jade box, a jade-white fruit appeared in front of his eyes, full of spirit energy. Is this the spirit Bodhi? Whether I can recover my Qi or even break through depends on this. Yi Guqin did not hesitate. He took out the spirit Bodhi and swallowed it. Generally speaking, when a warrior obtained a sacred medicine and wanted to refine it, most of them would choose to find an alchemist to refine it into an elixir or consume it together with other treasured medicines. However, Yi Guqin, who possessed the devouring power, did not need to go through so much trouble. A strand of devouring devil qi overflowed from his body and turned into a small black hole, swallowing the spirit Bodhi. With Yi Guqin's strength as a two-star ancient god, although he could compete with the heaven and earth spirit bridge's prides, he still had his shortcomings. If he relied on the spirit Bodhi to recover his qi, Yi Guqin was confident that he could deal with all troubles. As the spirit Bodhi was swallowed, an extremely dense and pure spirit energy was poured into Yi Guqin's qi. The extreme qi, which had almost stopped operating, also began to slowly recover. If it was an ordinary sea of qi and sea of consciousness, Yi Guqin would have collapsed long ago. However, the extreme qi and the chaotic sea of consciousness could withstand the enormous pressure and survive. This was the benefit of cultivating the 9 Tribulations Heart Sutra. In a flash, 7 days had passed. The time for the 5 academies selection was approaching. I wonder how young Master Duga's cultivation is going. Han Lingxuan's jade-like face revealed a worried expression. Although she believed that Yi Guqin was not the kind of person who would speak arrogantly. However, it was still hard to believe that he could recover his true qi cultivation with just a spirit Bodhi. Further away, Qin Zhen and Qin Paisai were also looking in the direction of Yi Guqin. Qin Zhen knew that Yi Guqin did not lie to him. Then, relying on the spirit Bodhi, he would definitely recover his true qi cultivation. But until now, Qin Zhen had not sensed any unusual fluctuations from Yi Guqin's side. Father, could that Duga Wubai really be a swindler? I'm afraid that even Sister Ling Xian has been deceived by him, Qin Paisai said worriedly. If that's the case, then the price for his deceit will be his own life, said Qin Zhen. Yi Guqin, who had been sitting cross-legged in his room, suddenly shuddered. His qi, which had been quiet for a long time, finally began to revolve. On the side, Su Qingyu's primordial spirit appeared. With a wave of his sleeve, an invisible soul power enveloped the entire courtyard, preventing the fluctuations from spreading out. Su Qingyu knew that Yi Guqin was about to break through. Moreover, with his special potential, the commotion caused by his breakthrough would not be small. Rumble. Within Yi Guqin's body, it was as if thousands of thunderbolts were rumbling. As the saying goes, one must rise after the fall. After his ultimate qi had recovered, his true qi was even more vigorous and pure. It had turned into a ball of thick liquid, truly becoming a qi. Within the tumbling qi, endless true qi liquid condensed, as if a heaven and earth bridge was spreading out from the qi. This heaven and earth bridge was a sign that Yi Guqin had stepped into the heaven and earth bridge. In the blink of an eye, Yi Guqin could clearly feel the relationship between the heaven and earth bridge and the surrounding heaven and earth. His every movement seemed to be able to resonate with the heaven and earth spirit qi. If it was before, Yi Guqin could only use the power within his qi. But now, Yi Guqin could use the heaven and earth spirit bridge to allow his qi to communicate with the heaven and earth spirit qi outside, erupting with even greater power. Rumble. On the surface of Yi Guqin's body, there were thousands of rays of light, and his entire body was like glass and jade. What a huge commotion! Even Su Qingyu was a little surprised when he saw this. If he had not blocked the fluctuations, this strange phenomenon would have shaken the entire Tianfeng capital. In Yi Guqin's qi, the heaven and earth bridge was condensing piece by piece. Finally, it stopped at the 3rd level of the heaven and earth bridge. 3rd level? Yi Guqin was not disappointed. After all, his knowledge C had not yet recovered, and it was already good enough for him to break through to the 3rd level. Once his knowledge C recovered, Yi Guqin's cultivation speed would be much faster. Divine Dwelling Stage, Di Haotian, Gu Xiaoyang, Just you wait. Yi Guqian's eyes were cold. The reason why he was suppressed by the two was because his cultivation level was not enough. If they were at the same cultivation level, Yi Guqian was confident that even Di Haotian could not completely suppress him. After adjusting his breathing, Yi Guqian's handsome appearance was disdainful, and his eyes were flying. A powerful aura was brewing in his body again, and then it was withdrawn. Not only did I recover my qi, but I also broke through to the third level of the heaven and earth bridge and can use the innate sword embryo. This strength is enough for the 5 academy selection. Yi Guqian murmured in his heart. He could compete with the heaven and earth bridge when he was in the great mysterious gate stage. Now that he had broken through to the heaven and earth bridge, even though he was only at the 3rd level, in terms of strength, even an 8th or 9th level prodigy would not be able to compete with him without any trump cards. Yi Guqian could even wrestle with those of the divine dwelling stage. Next, I will start to comprehend the sky-devouring secret technique, Yi Guqian said to himself. As one of the top 10 ancient secret techniques, the sky-devouring secret technique was enough to be Yi Guqian's trump card. The sky-devouring secret technique had a total of 5 levels. Yi Guqian began to comprehend the first level. A few days passed. Yi Guqian began to comprehend the first level. Now I can use the sky-devouring secret technique to increase my cultivation by 3 levels. Most importantly, there is no limit to the level. Yi Guqian's eyes were clear. The sky-devouring secret technique that he had cultivated before could only increase his cultivation by 1 level. But the sky-devouring secret technique was different. Yi Guqian was a 9th level prodigy, and he could use the sky-devouring secret technique to directly reach the divine dwelling stage. This was the most powerful aspect of the sky-devouring secret technique as an ancient secret technique. It's a pity that I haven't comprehended the first level of the sky-devouring secret technique yet. Yi Guqian was a little disappointed. The cultivation of ancient secret techniques is complicated. Your progress is already very fast. Even the prodigies of the overlord forces would be ashamed. Su Qingyu smiled. He was more and more satisfied with Yi Guqian. He couldn't help but admire his daughter's foresight. It's about time for the 5 academy selection. Yi Guqian's strength had increased greatly, and he had the confidence to face all threats. He pushed the door open and saw Han Lingxian pacing back and forth. Han Lingxian was delighted to see Yi Guqian. Yi Guqian looked past Han Lingxian and saw Qin Zhen and Qin Paisai. Even the Su siblings, Zuoqiu Qing, Zhen Lang, and other prodigies of the Tianfeng Ridge were there. Almost everyone at the Tianfeng banquet was gathered outside the courtyard. Yi Guqian was slightly taken aback. So grand. The 5 academy selection is about to begin. Today is the day we set off. If Sister Lingxian hadn't stopped us, we would have gone in to look for you. Qin Paisai was also a little unhappy. Yi Guqian nodded. Qin Zhen looked deeply at Yi Guqian and frowned. You're only at the 3rd level of the heaven and earth spiritual bridge. What? As soon as these words came out, all the prodigies' eyes fell on Yi Guqian. They were surprised not because Yi Guqian had recovered his cultivation. They were surprised because Yi Guqian's cultivation was only at the 3rd level. Chapter 873. The Sky Prides of Skywind Ridge didn't dare to say anything about Qin Zhen giving the spirit Bodhi to Yi Guqian, but they were still complaining in their hearts. However, Yi Guqian was able to break Su Wenbin's sword move with 1 strike, which was enough to shock them. In addition, Han Lingxian said that Yi Guqian couldn't use his true qi because he was injured. This made these people think that Yi Guqian might have been a heaven's pride, and he should have been at least stage 5 or above. But now, when Qin Zhen pointed out the truth, everyone was tongue-tied. Could a stage 3 heaven and earth bridge help them deal with Purple Smoke Ridge, Yellow Dragon Ridge, and Yu Yuankue? Deception. This is definitely a deception. Su Wenbin immediately yelled. The top Sky Prides of Skywind Ridge were all at stage 6. Those who were slightly weaker were at stage 4 or stage 5. As for stage 3, they were at the bottom of the pile. Hearing Su Wenbin's yell, all the sky prides of Skywind Ridge stared at Yi Guqin with hostility. Yi Guqin had previously boasted about his abilities. But now, his strength had aroused everyone's doubts. No, young Master Dugu is definitely not that kind of person. Han Lingxian was at a loss. She did believe in Yi Guqin, but it was indeed difficult to convince the crowd with his stage 3 cultivation. Sister Lingxian, you've been deceived by him. He's only at stage 3. He's not even as good as me. Qin Paisai stomped her feet in anger. She was also at stage 4. Dugu Wubai, is this how you repay me? Qin Zhen's face darkened. Oh, is that so? But I feel that after my breakthrough, my strength should be pretty good. Facing the needle-like gazes, Yi Guqin stood there calmly. What? He broke through. In other words, this Dugu Wubai was only at the life and death threshold before? All the sky prides were once again stunned by Yi Guqin's words. The difference between the Sword Dynasty and the Saint Origin Dynasty was too great. In the Saint Origin Dynasty, life and death chamber was considered a top genius. But in the Sword Dynasty, life and death chamber was the weakest. Strength is not determined by one's realm. Su Wenbin, do you want to try? Yi Guqin's gaze was as sharp as a sword as he looked directly at Su Wenbin. Su Wenbin's expression froze. Just as he was about to refute, he recalled Yi Guqin's godlike sword strike, and immediately became listless. Qin Zhen glanced at Yi Guqin in surprise. The confidence in a person's eyes could not be faked. Stop arguing. Dugu Wubai, I'll trust you this time. Everyone, get ready. We'll head to Thunderwind Ridge, Qin Zhen said. Father, this isn't too appropriate. Qin Paisai's face was filled with worry. She didn't trust Yi Guqin as much as Han Lingxian did. If there were any accidents in the 5 academies selection, Qin Zhen's position as the Lord of Heavenly Wind City would come to an end. Thinking of this, Qin Paisai turned to look at Yi Guqin and Han Lingxian. Sister Lingxian, I trust you, but I don't trust him. Qin Paisai said and left angrily. The rest of the sky prides, such as Zhuo Qiuqing and Zhen Lang, also looked at Yi Guqin suspiciously before leaving. Yi Guqin didn't care about how others looked at him. On the other hand, Han Lingxian was under too much pressure because of Yi Guqin's matter. Miss Han, I'm sorry to have implicated you, Yi Guqin said. It's okay. Lingxian knows what kind of person young Master Dugu is. Han Lingxian smiled beautifully. A few hours later, a huge flying boat rose into the sky outside the Lord's mansion. Yi Guqin, Han Lingxian, Qin Paisai, and the other sky prides of Heavenly Wind Ridge left Heavenly Wind Ridge under Qin Zhen's lead and headed to Wind Thunder Ridge. The 5 academies selection was a grand event in the entire Sword Dynasty. After all, the 5 academies were directly under the Sword Dao Alliance. If one could enter the 5 academies, not only would they receive the best training, but they would also have a chance to compete for the title of Sword Sun. The South Sky Region Sky Pride's battle was about to begin. At this time, if one could obtain the title of Sword Sun, they would definitely receive great training from the Sword Dynasty. Therefore, the 5 academies selection this time would definitely be more intense than before. Those sky prides on the sword ranking who didn't plan to join the 5 academies would take advantage of this opportunity to show their skills. One could imagine how intense the 5 academies selection would be this time. Just as the sky prides of the 360 ridges of the dynasty were pouring into the assessment site, Wind Thunder Ridge. Some people from the 5 academies were also preparing to set off for Wind Thunder Ridge to test the sky prides of this year. Tianxian College, one of the 5 academies of the Sword Dynasty, was located in Wind Cloud Ridge. At this moment, within Goddess Academy, on top of a cliff shrouded in mist, a beautiful and elegant girl in a water-green gauze dress stared blankly into the distance. Her delicate body was like a bud waiting to bloom, delicate and soft. Her face was fair, her lips were moist, and her teeth were sparkling. She was a young girl as beautiful as a lotus flower that had just emerged from the water. Yi Guqin certainly wouldn't be unfamiliar with her. This girl was Mu Xingzu, who had been traveling outside for a long time. Mu Xingzu's cultivation had already reached the peak of the 9th level of the Heaven and Earth Spirit Bridge, and was not far from the Divine Dwelling stage. Her Soul Sword intent had also transformed into Soul Sword Dao. She was now ranked 12th on the Sword Dynasty's sword list, and was also a disciple of the Holy Emblem of Tianxian College. Her status was extraordinary. It could be said that in the entire Sword Dynasty, Mu Xingzu was absolutely ranked at the top of the Sky Prides. Mu Xingzu's extraordinary strength and beautiful appearance made her one of the most popular and admired women in the hearts of the Sword Dynasty's geniuses. But Mu Xingzu had never been close to anyone of the opposite sex. At this moment, Mu Xingzu's face was haggard, and she felt lost. She didn't want to eat or drink. Because she had also heard the news of Yi Guqin in the Sword Dynasty. He had taken the 9 deaths no regrets pill, seriously injured Di Haotian, and then disappeared. Everyone thought that Yi Guqin was dead. Senior brother Yi, how could you be dead? Mu Xingzu still couldn't accept this fact. She also wanted to return to the Saint Origin dynasty, but she was stopped by the Tianxian College's dean. Because this Sword Sun battle was too important, Mu Xingzu couldn't miss this opportunity. Xingzhu, what's wrong? You've been absent-minded recently, and you haven't been cultivating. The dean is worried about you. A girl in red walked over. She had snow-white skin and plump lips. At this moment, she was looking at Mu Xingzu with a smile. Senior sister Yinglang. Mu Xingzu forced a smile, but she was absent-minded. By the way, the dean asked me to take you out for a walk. The 5 Academy selection is going to be held in the Wind and Thunder Ridge. Let's go and have a look. Yinglang smiled. I'll pass. Mu Xingzu really didn't want to go. Sorry, the dean insisted. You should know the dean's temper. Yinglang lowered her voice. Mu Xingzu sighed and nodded. Okay, let's not delay. Yinglang pulled Mu Xingzu and left. However, just as the 2 girls left the Tianxian College's mountain gate, a young man with long blue hair and an outstanding temperament had been waiting outside for a long time. His handsome face was as sharp as a knife. His nose was tall and straight, and his eyes were deep. He wore a blue robe embroidered with cloud patterns. He was playing with a red maple leaf in his hand. The aura of the Divine Dwelling stage was naturally released. 5th on the sword ranking, Jiang Fengmian of the Jiang family. Yinglang was slightly surprised. Chapter 874. The Jiang family, like the Hua family, was also a top family in the Sword Dao Alliance and had a false saint. The Sword Dao Alliance included many Sword Dao families. But among the aristocratic families, the real leaders were the top aristocratic families with false saints. For example, the Yu family, where Yu Yuankue was from, also had a venerable, but it was still not comparable to the Hua family, the Jiang family, and other families. I didn't expect it to be Mr. Jiang. Why didn't you enter our Tianxian College? Yinglang's eyes flashed. The entire Sword Dynasty knew that Jiang Fengmian was pursuing Mu Xingzu. But Mu Xingzu had never been nice to Jiang Fengmian. In terms of appearance, Jiang Fengmian was handsome. In terms of strength, he was 5th on the sword ranking and a divine dwelling heavenly talent. In terms of background, he was a top false saint family. It could be said that he was perfect from all angles. If it were any other woman, even Yinglang, it would be impossible for her not to have feelings for Jiang Fengmian. She sometimes wondered why Mu Xingzu was like a blockhead and never pretended to be nice to Jiang Fengmian. Jiang Fengmian said calmly, "It's inconvenient for me to be rude. I can wait outside. The 2 of you should be going to the Wind and Thunder Ridge. I have already prepared a ship. If you don't mind, can we go together?" A gorgeous ship was floating in the air. Yinglang was slightly tempted, but Mu Xingzu said expressionlessly, "No need." "Is it because of your master?" Jiang Fengmian said with a deep look in his eyes. When Mu Xingzu was selected by the Tianxian College, the dean even personally said that he wanted to accept Mu Xingzu as his disciple. However, Mu Xingzu refused and said that she already had a master. After that, Mu Xingzu also expressed her admiration for her master many times. This also aroused everyone's curiosity. Who exactly was Mu Xingzu's master? However, Mu Xingzu had never revealed her master's identity. Many people speculated that the reason Mu Xingzu kept her pursuers at a respectful distance was related to her mysterious master. Some people even guessed that although Mu Xingzu said that she was his master, she was most likely his Taoist companion. It was because of this that Jiang Fengmian asked this question. Unexpectedly, as soon as he said this, Jiang Fengmian felt the atmosphere suddenly turn cold. Mu Xingzu's pretty face turned cold, and her delicate body trembled slightly. Didn't Jiang Fengmian's words poke at her sore spot? Senior sister Yinglang, let's go, Mu Xingzu said coldly and boarded Tianxian College's flying boat. I'm sorry, young Master Jiang. Yinglang said apologetically before she left with Mu Xingzu. Young master, this is ridiculous. Who do you think you are? How dare he treat you with such an attitude? A servant behind Jiang Fengmian said indignantly. Ha, it doesn't matter. Will you cherish something that is easily obtainable? Jiang Fengmian smiled faintly, and his eyes were deep. If possible, I'd like to meet Miss Mu's master. What kind of person is he that she can't forget? Young master, where are we going next? The servant asked. Of course we're going to follow in her footsteps. Wind Thunder Ridge. Jiang Fengmian smiled and was not discouraged at all. Wind Thunder Ridge was considered a rather powerful ridge among the 360 ridges of the Sword Dynasty. It had always been the trial ground of the 5 academies selection, so it had always been bustling and popular. With the start of the selection, the Wind Thunder Ridge gathered even more prides from all over the world. After 7 or 8 days of flying, the Wind Thunder Ridge's flying boat also entered the range of Wind Thunder Ridge. On the flying boat, Ye Guqin was sitting cross-legged and adjusting his breath. Han Lingxian came over and explained some things to Ye Guqin. Young Master Dugu, we're about to reach Thunder City. The location of the 5 academies selection is in the Sword Venerable's relics, which are thousands of miles away from Thunder City. The Sword Venerable's relics? Ye Guqin looked confused. Han Lingxian could not help but smile bitterly. It seemed that Ye Guqin was indeed very unfamiliar with the Sword Dynasty. The Sword Venerable's relics were left behind by a 9th Heaven Venerable in the Wind Thunder Ridge. Later, the 5 academies transformed it into a place to select talents. Han Lingxian explained patiently. I see, Ye Guqin said. I heard that in the depths of the Sword Venerable's relics, there are still weapons that the Venerable used. There are even heavenly tribulation divine weapons. Han Lingxian said longingly. Heavenly tribulation divine weapons? Ye Guqin raised his eyebrows. He was currently lacking a suitable sword. But if it's really a heavenly tribulation divine weapon, why hasn't anyone taken it? Ye Guqin asked curiously. Firstly, it seems that the heavenly tribulation divine weapon is damaged and can only display the power of a quasi-heavenly tribulation divine weapon. Secondly, the 5 academies do not allow other experts to enter the Sword Venerable's relics to seize opportunities. Thirdly, it's that sword. Not everyone can pull it out. Han Lingxian said. Oh, interesting. Ye Guqin smiled faintly. Young Master Dugu, don't tell me you want to get that sword. Han Lingxian teased. I do have that thought. Ye Guqin said truthfully. He could not use the demon sword god-devouring sword for the time being, and the Xianming heavy sword was broken. If he could get that quasi-heavenly tribulation divine weapon, it would be good for him to temporarily transition. Young Master Dugu is really humorous. Han Lingxian could not help but laugh. Even Hua Wuxiu, who was ranked 3rd on the sword ranking, had tried to pull that sword out, but he could not. Although Ye Guqin hid his strength well, in Han Lingxuan's heart, there was still a certain gap between him and Hua Wuxiu, who was ranked on the sword ranking. Not long after, an incomparably huge city appeared before Ye Guqin's eyes. It was several times bigger than the Saint Origin dynasty's imperial capital. It was Thunder City. Countless flying shuttles flew in from all directions around Thunder Rumbling City and gathered in the city. Fortunately, Thunder City was big enough. Otherwise, it would not be able to accommodate so many people. After the people from Sky Wind Ridge entered Thunder City, Qin found an inn and settled them down. Everyone, the 5 Academy selection will begin in a few days. We can go to the sword ranking temple to practice our swordsmanship, Qin Paisai suggested. However, her real purpose was to judge Yi Guqin's strength. Okay, I agree, Su Wenbin echoed. He glanced at Yi Guqin vaguely, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a sneer. Yi Guqin hesitated for a moment. He had already broken Hua Wuxiu's sword shadow when he was in Tianfeng City. Above them were the first and second on the sword ranking. However, there were no shadows of the first and second in Tianfeng City. I wonder if there are any here. Yi Guqin thought to himself and then nodded. Qin Paisai smiled. Her plan had worked. The people from Sky Wind Ridge went to the sword ranking temple. There were branches in all 360 ridges in the sword ranking temple. Naturally, there was one in Thunder City. However, at this moment, the Thunder City's sword ranking shrine was filled with people. After all, there were way too many geniuses from all over the place. Finally, the people from Sky Wind Ridge squeezed in. Yi Guqin looked and shook his head in disappointment. There were no shadows of the first and second on the sword ranking either. It seems that the first and second on the sword ranking are really mysterious. Yi Guqin sighed. Qin Paisai rolled her eyes and wanted to ask Yi Guqin to challenge them. However, at this moment, 2 groups of people walked towards the people from Sky Wind Ridge. When Qin Paisai saw this, her expression immediately turned ugly. Violet Smoke Ridge, Yellow Dragon Ridge. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.